date, but 150% in the past year. So what's one day off, but it is weighing down overall tech. The only sectors doing better, three of them: energy, communication services, and consumer staples. Energy, you are looking at oil. Those prices are moving higher for NYMEX crude, for Brent, and you have things like nat gas also getting a higher day considering the storm coming. There's concerns about that. But overall, Matt, again, it is a weaker day, and we are headed for another weekly loss, the second one in a row.
All right, so we'll continue to watch those groups for you, as well as the swinging indexes. Coming up, shutdown potentially averted. The House moves a $1.2 trillion funding deal to the Senate. What it means next with the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
And I'm Jason Kelly, and we're back with another season of The Deal with athletes and entrepreneurs who are changing the game on and off the field. Jerry Jones.
1-1 is 3 in sports, not 2. And it's because that 3 is imagination. That 3 is putting yourself in a way, having yourself hit the home run.
Erica Ayers-Badon.
I'm a high energy board member. I'm very passionate. I have a lot of opinions.
Up in our zone.
I want to light fires in people's lives. And that is still one of my core mandates for all of my businesses.
Justin Tuck.
I tell all of my friends that play in leagues now, make these relationships now while you're hot. Don't wait till you're like your 12th year in and you're just hanging on.
Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Hadi Stradwell here in Sydney where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering. We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of the century.
Join us on Bloomberg BHF3. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything. Bringing you up to the minute news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Sherrian in Seoul, and this is Bloomberg.
Trading day is about to start.
You're already looking for that edge.
GeoTrade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe. I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie. This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We got to talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big
The
things.
new level of previous.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
Can't fake passion. You are, you are.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
Congress is getting closer to fully funding the government. The House passed its final 6 spending bills, more than $1.2 trillion worth, sending the package to the Senate ahead of the January 30th deadline. The deal locks in fiscal 2026 funding and adds guardrails against Trump administration funding shifts. Senate action is expected next week. Let's bring in Jason Smith, House Ways and Means Committee Chairman, the top tax official in Congress, to talk about.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble and on YouTube. You can see the telemetry of the market in real time on YouTube. You can also watch both versions of the live stream on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I'm going to go over the markets and the news and tell you how to improve your health. It's really simple. If you follow my advice, you'll make some money and improve your health. So with that, please go to my store, help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. I have thousands of videos out there for free. If you like the work that I do, please share the links. Ask your social media to follow me. You can follow me on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, Rumble, TikTok, Substack, Patreon. These are great ways to get my content. You can also donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my homepage. You can also get ebooks, supplements, and course material in immunology and pulmonology. By supporting my work, you'll be able to learn about how to improve your health and how to navigate the markets. With that said, please go to my store and get the structural nano silver toothpaste. This has no fluoride. This will help to neutralize, improve your oral cavity, reduce plaque, and help with your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. A lot of people don't realize that poor oral hygiene can lead to cardiovascular problems. So please go to my store, get the structural nano silver toothpaste to neutralize. This is really important also to use during the winter season, but you should use it year round. It's a very high quality toothpaste. Structural nano silver gels, you can get it in the quick dispenser or in the tube form. You use them the same way. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put the gel on the lesion. It will help to heal the lesion quicker. In addition, you can apply it topically every day to improve your skin health. And if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. They'll stay active for 5.5 hours and neutralize. So you need to prepare. This is very important during the winter season, but also year round. And again, it's dual purpose. So please go to my store and get the gel. And I have a new product on my store for ones that have sore muscles, headaches, joint pain, sports injury, a bruise. Use this. This is called Super Strong Relief. You apply it topically, and it'll relieve the pain within about 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. So it's for bruises, sore muscles. After a heavy workout, you may be sore. You can apply it to your skin and help to relieve the pain. If you have a headache, apply it to your neck and your temples and your forehead. It'll relieve the headache. And if you have joint pain, put it around the joint that you have the pain, and it will relieve the pain. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Super Strong Relief. Very high quality product. And lastly, structural nano silver soaps help to neutralize, help to improve your skin and your pores. It's very high quality. You can get it in charcoal tea tree, lemongrass, and in peppermint. So please go to my store, get a few bars of the structural nano silver soaps. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Now with that, let's listen in to Bloomberg. Oh, the market is open up. All right, so the market's open. So the S&P 500 is trading at 6,897. Again, there was a little bit of a sell-off because of the Davos spat about tariffs because of Greenland, but that seemed to have stabilized. So the S&P 500 resistance level is still 7,000. It's a big resistance level, but when it breaks it, it's going to be a major support level. So right now, 7,000 is the resistance level. I still have the target for year end for this year at 7,800. It could be as low as 7,400. But right now I'm at 7,800 for the year end target. It depends on what goes on in Venezuela, what goes on in Taiwan, and Iran, and tariffs. There's a lot, and we're in a midterm election, so there's going to be concern about the House potentially going back to the Democratic Party for control. So there's a lot that is going to happen this year. Now, VIX is trading at about 16. Oil has been going up. It's at 61.06. There was a big intervention by the BOJ with the Japanese yen. Last night it was trading as high as 159.21. They intervened and it dropped down to 157.32. Every time a central bank intervenes in the currency market, it does revert. And now it's trading at 158.28. Okay, so if they were long that currency pair, USD to Japanese yen, and because of that intervention, they would have been wiped out, or their stop loss would have been activated. All right. With that, I also want to talk about energy. Because of the cold weather, there's a movement of natural gas. Now, it's trading at 5.206. It was trading as much as 5.3 pre-session. And oil is trading at 61.12. All right. So because of the cold weather, energy is going to be drifting upward. Now, what I am doing is that I'm going major short on natural gas. All right. I'm just buying. What I'm doing is I'm shorting natural gas now, because once the cold weather goes away, even though it may start to tick up, may even go to 6. I don't care. All right. Because what's going to happen is that right when the cold weather goes away, bam, natural gas is going to go to 3.5. There's a lot of money to be made. So I'm just accumulating, waiting, building up that potential energy. And then bam, make a ton of money. Now I just told you how to make tens of thousands of dollars if you just pay attention to me. All right? Or maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how much you're going to put in. All right, right now it's trading at 5.1 right now. Okay? But there's going to be this undulation. Now, if you look at the future curve, the current contract is at 5.14. 1 month out contract is trading at 3.6, 3.5. So now you see where the drop is, because it's in backwardation. Okay, now with oil, there's lots of oil out there, but there's a concern: what will Trump do with Iran? We haven't heard anything about Iran lately. If Trump hits Iran, oil's going to jump to $4 a barrel. If Trump doesn't hit Iran, I think the trading range, because of how much of a supply there is for oil, is going to be around $56 to about $61 a barrel. Now, the cold weather is, causing a little bit of a momentum play with oil and natural gas. But once we get past this cold season, this little cold spell, which is going to last for approximately 10 days in the East Coast and in the South, once that passes, natural gas is going to drop, and oil, assuming that we don't hit Iran, will start drifting back down closer to 56. Now, if you paid attention to what I just said, you can make a lot of money. Now, go to my store. Why don't you donate? Or why don't you, better yet, buy the products that actually help to slow down your aging? Now, no one is as accurate as I am on this. Trust me on this. If not, don't be so damn, don't be surprised. If you don't listen, don't be surprised that your life is a shit.
If you look at the top end of the U.S. equity market, looking at multiples and valuations, it's very easy to make the argument that it's very expensive to invest in U.S. stocks. So yeah, when we look at this, it's pretty hard to see any semblance of true selling. Like obviously we had the Davis pension fund that's dumping some treasuries, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's very small in any sort of full selling context. But for the most part, they're still heavily invested in U.S. assets across fixed income and equities.
Well, and so much has been made, James, of last year's outperformance in overseas markets. But if you look at a longer view, the U.S. has far outperformed European assets and EM. How does that look from through an ETF lens?
Yeah, I mean, no matter how you slice it, if you look at things, going back to the beginning of 2025, it's pretty comparable. I mean, yes, the international market beat the U.S., but it wasn't by like a massive margin. The U.S. market still performed, 18% over the year. So it's not like the U.S. went down and European or international stocks went up. And then, like as you said, you extend that out a couple of decades, and it's not even comparable to talk about this. We're just at a blip now of showing international outperformance. And ironically, we're seeing a little bit of, the non-Mag 7, the smaller stocks in the U.S. actually showing the same sort of thing over the last 2 months.
James, thanks so much. James Safert there of our all-star ETF team at Bloomberg Intelligence. Coming up in the next hour, Amy Wu Silverman of RBC on what she calls violent rotations underneath the market. Partners Group CEO David Layton and his company, their AUM rises by more than 20%. Plus, Critical Metals CEO Tony Sage, they get rare earths out of Greenland.
All right, so I want to take a look at some of the news that's going on here. All right, let's listen into the National Review about mob psychology.
Project. Nestled in Alaska.
Hey everyone, what does this remind you of? I'm Chris Lyer of National Review, and that's Gregory Bovino, the chief of Border Patrol, getting swarmed by anti-agitators in Minneapolis. And you know what that makes me think of a little bit? The French Revolution. Now, I'm not saying he's going to get torn limb by limb from a mob and get his head stuck on a pike and have his head paraded around the Twin Cities. At least let's hope not. But I think it's the French Revolution that represents the purest distillation of what mobs are really like in their most extreme form. And this is the event where, unfortunately, mobs had their greatest effect on the course of Western history. So what I want to do here, look a little at the French Revolution, develop some themes and points about mobs and what they're like, bring those forward, illustrate them with reference to Minneapolis, and then go on to some of the best thinking we've ever had about what mobs are and how they think, or very often don't think. So let's start with this horrible cataclysm that rocked France in the late 18th century, the French Revolution. Okay, we don't need to go into great detail about the French Revolution. The crucial point is that it was driven by mobs and by mob violence. Simon Schaumann, his great classic book about the French Revolution called Citizens, makes the point the French Revolution didn't devolve into violence. It was defined by violence and by the work of mobs, pretty much from the very beginning, right? Storming in the Bastille, still have Bastille Day celebrated in France. It's the work of a mob. And the governor of the Bastille is promised safe passage. A mob surges, captures him, beats him, kills him, beheads him, and takes his head, puts it on a pike, and parades it around the streets. Then you had the so-called Great Fear in 1789. Out in the countryside, the peasants think that there is an aristocratic plot to starve them deliberately. There is nothing to this. It is totally made up. It's based on rumor and paranoia, but it totally runs out of control, right? Everyone thinks, well, if the other people think there's this aristocratic plot, there must be an aristocratic plot. And those other people think, well, those guys think it, so we got to think it, and it must be true. They think they're brigands roaming the countryside that have to be fought and resisted. So you have armed peasants in one village, then mistaking the peasants in the other village who've also taken up arms to fight these supposed brigands. They think they're the brigands. So this phenomenon totally disconnected from reality, but creates this massive spasm of disorganized mob violence. In 1792, you have the September massacres. Here, Prussia and Austria, France is at war at the time, Prussia and Austria are advancing, creates heightened tensions within France, understandably, but then this rumor starts that there's this fifth column, these internal enemies that are going to rise up and end the revolution and slaughter all the revolutionaries and these prisoners that are going to do this. So what do we have to do? They're going to kill us. We got to go in the prisons first and kill them. And the mobs descend on the prisons. In the course of about 5 days, they killed more than 1,000 people. They set up these kangaroo tribunals that reach these instant verdicts about people based on nothing, on their name, on their accent, on their appearance. There's another horrific event of the French Revolution. I mentioned appearance. The revolutionaries, of course, were known as sans-culottes. Culottes were knee breeches. They didn't wear knee breeches. They wore long trousers. And if you didn't wear the same thing, if you didn't look like them, if you didn't look the right way by their definitions, they were suspicious of you. They might come after you. Symbolism mattered a lot. You had to wear the tricolor cockade. And if you didn't, they were suspicious of you, and they might come after you. So before we move on here, just want to focus in a little bit on what this violence, mob violence, looked like in a little more granular detail. Dickens had a great description in his classic novel about the French Revolution, A Tale of Two Cities. This is a passage about the killing of an unpopular official named Joseph Foulon, who was caught up in the paranoia about aristocrats supposedly plotting to starve the populace. This is what Dickens writes. This is when the mob realizes that it can get at Foulon. The men were terrible, and the bloody-minded anger with which they looked from the windows caught up what arms they had and came pouring down into the streets, but the women were a sight to chill the boldest. They ran out with streaming hair, urging one another and themselves to madness with the wildest cries and actions. Villain Foulon taken my sister, old Foulon taken my mother, miscreant Foulon taken my daughter. Then scores of others ran into the midst of these. Husbands and brothers and young men, give us the blood of Foulon, give us the head of Foulon, give us the heart of Foulon, give us the body and soul of Foulon, rend Foulon to pieces and dig him into the ground, that grass may grow from him. Needless to say, did not end well for Foulon. He had supposedly said, by the way, that people could eat grass, and they stuffed grass in his mouth as they were killing him. And afterwards, I just want to focus on one last example, because I just think the details are important to get at what we're really talking about here. Same time period, this is a historian describing an innocent baker caught up by the mob. His name was Francois. Francois was just commencing his 7th batch on that day when a woman who had been unable to procure bread at 9 in the morning and was told to wait until the 7th batch was completed entered his house to assure herself that all the bread had really been sold. She found 3 stale loaves which had been reserved for the men. She rushed to the street, holding one in her hand, loudly accusing the baker of only distributing a part of the stock. Riot began. He was accused of wishing to keep bread from the people. They burst into a shop, seized the unhappy man, and disregarding his cries, hanged him. They paraded his head on a pike through the streets, compelling every baker they met to kiss the remains. The unhappy wife of Francois, far advanced in pregnancy, running about in a state of distraction, met the crowd. At the sight of the bloody head, she fainted. The mob had the barbarity to lower it into her arms and press the lifeless lips against her face. Unspeakable cruelty. Again, of course, we're not seeing anything on that level in Minneapolis. But what have we learned through this brief description of mobs and how they operated in the French Revolution? Well, mobs are obsessed with seeking out and hunting down their enemies. They operate on the basis of suspicion, rumor, and paranoia. They are cruel. They want to intimidate people and make examples of them. They are violent, and they are obsessed with symbolism. And we see every single one of these things in Minneapolis at the moment. Seeking out, hunting down their enemies, Yes. Here's a clip of a mob going after a conservative in a car.
That's the sound of an American oil company hard at work. Want to be a part of it? Listen up.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, and I'm the CEO of Phoenix Energy. I look forward.
That him? Yeah! Open the door! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Just look! Right, let them go! Let them go! Hey, pull over! Pull over! Pull over! Leave it! Leave it up! No! No, just let him
Operating on the basis of rumor and paranoia, yeah, here they are going after a couple of tech workers that they think are ICE agents at a cafe.
What? We do custom apps for a whole bunch of companies around Minnesota and the country.
And here they are going after someone they suspect of being an ICE agent based on the car he's driving, and tell him, by the way, in the future to rent a different car because that vehicle is too counter-revolutionary and ICE-like.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have to do this. I have to do this. That's all. We just gotta stop this.
He's got a lot of camera equipment. I think we can save it.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm trying to tell them. The first lady here, that's all I can do. I already shut this. First of all, I don't do that time. I respect the art. Yeah, no. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I just don't understand how to do it. Yeah.
Yes, he was here yesterday. I didn't recognize him.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm not here to help you.
No, I understand.
I put you in a vehicle like this and just.
I get it. With all due respect to everybody, I get it.
You can't. You go back something.
Seeking to intimidate and demand assent to their agenda? Yeah. Here's a burly guy just walking down the street.
Where you going? Huh? Are you ICE?
No.
You like ICE? Say ICE! Say it! Say it! Your mom's a bitch! Say it!
Violent? Yeah, here they are knocking down a guy just suspected of being with ICE.
Okay, good. You all right, dude? You all right? Why did you read out earlier? I don't know. Where am I? I'm with them.
Here they are manhandling and injuring right-wing activist Jake Lang. And here they are warring with ICE. Obsessed with symbols and trying to coerce people into conformity? Yep. Mobs. It's all right there. And as promised, let's consider very briefly the work of perhaps the greatest analyst of mobs, a French polymath named Gustave Le Bon. His life and career spanned late 19th, early 20th century. Wrote a lot of books. One of them was called The Psychology of Revolution. And let's take a look at a passage from that. Whatever their origin, revolutions do not produce their full effects until they have penetrated the soul of the multitude. They therefore represent a consequence of the psychology of crowds. Man, as part of a multitude, is a very different being from the same man as an isolated individual. His conscious individuality vanishes in the unconscious personality of the crowd. The collective mind, momentarily formed, represents a very special kind of aggregate. Its chief peculiarity is that it is entirely dominated by unconscious elements and is subject to a peculiar collective logic. Among the other characteristics of crowds, we must note their infinite credulity and exaggerated sensibility, their short-sightedness, and their incapacity to respond to the influences of reason. By reason of the extreme sensibility of crowds, their sentiments, good or bad, are always exaggerated. This exaggeration increases still further in times of revolution. The least excitement will then lead them to act with the utmost fury. Their credulity, so great even in the normal state, is still further increased. The most improbable statements are accepted. These various characteristics show that man in the crowd descends to a very low degree in the scale of civilization. He becomes a savage with all a savage's faults and qualities. Just so, and that's why the likes of Tim Waltz and Jacob Fry need to call off what Laban called the savages. They need to tell the mobs to cease and desist and go home. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.
This is what Aristotle and Plato and Socrates warned people about. These are individuals that were giants in terms of intellect. They were part of the Greek philosopher canon. And they warned. Mobs can cause major havoc. This is the reason why you can't have a pure democracy. A pure democracy doesn't work. People would say, well, yeah, it would. It's whatever the people want. No, a constitutional republic is what works, because that's where your rights are anchored with the Enlightenment, your property rights. In a pure democracy, it's the whims of the masses. And look at what's happening with the whims of the masses in Minneapolis. Conservatives need to push back. Conservatives should not allow this to be happening. And what are these mobs really doing? They're saying ICE needs to get out. Why is ICE there? Because of illegals. They're elite. There are people that are there illegally. They need to leave. They need to be forced out. So this mob is protecting illegals. They're circumventing the laws of immigration. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the complete multivitamin. This complete multivitamin is chelated. It allows you to absorb it easier, and it reduces digestion issues. A lot of people, when they take a multivitamin, they may have some sort of indigestion type issue, or some sort of problem with breaking down the multivitamin. This is chelated. And what it basically means is it allows you to absorb it easier, and it reduces the stress on your digestive system. This is the reason why I keep on saying this multivitamin is super important for you. So it's easy to digest, and it has the multivitamins for proper enzymatic activity. These multivitamins will change the shape of your enzyme because they're cofactors. So the enzyme in your cells will perform better. It's a very impressive multivitamin. So please go to my store and get it. And it's part of the foundation to slow down the aging process. The other part of that foundation that you should stack it with the multivitamin is the probiotics. Probiotics you can get in veggie cap form or in powder form. I prefer the powder form because I take a lot of different powders for my supplementation. But the veggie cap or the powder form will help to bring down inflammation at the gut level, improve your immune system, increase your concentrations of IgA, which is a super important antibody in your gut, maintain that mucosal barrier, allow you to absorb your nutrients more efficiently, your metabolism will be better. Your skin health will be better. Your skin, your hair, and your nails will improve. Your memory will improve because with a good gut biome, you sleep better. And when you sleep better, you're consolidating memory, detoxifying your central nervous system. You're going to be well rested. A lot of people don't realize that if you have proper sleep, and it's regular, you're slowing down the aging process. In addition, you're improving the communication between your gut and your liver. You're improving your metabolism. You're slowing down the aging process. Good health starts at the gut. So please go to my store, get the probiotics, but also get the complete multivitamin. It's easy to digest and it helps with the enzymatic activity. All right, with that, let's listen in to what's going on with the weather and driving up oil markets.
Well, a little birdie told me rates are taking a dip, which means that dream home won't be there forever. Don't let someone else beat you to it.
We begin with Adam Klopp, just tracking this monster of a storm. Adam.
Monster of a storm indeed, all of this being driven by some ridiculously cold weather settling in across the northern tier of the country. Initially, that's going to impact with some moisture, and boy, we are going to have a large-scale storm on our hands. Look at some of these early morning temperatures. It's almost unbelievable. These are your wind chills, nearly negative 50 degrees in Minneapolis, negative 23 degrees in Chicago. That's what it feels like outside this morning. With that, we're waiting on this moisture to ultimately sweep through the country. I show you the national radar right now. Not a lot happening. Just a little bit of energy beginning to bubble up across the portions of the southwest right now. That will interact with that cold air. And as this entire system sweeps across the country, suddenly you're looking at most of it under some sort of winter weather advisory, winter storm warning, winter storm watch. A lot of folks are going to get in on this one as it is going to sweep from Texas all the way to the northeast. Now, I think ice is going to be the most damaging, the most deadly, the most dangerous of this entire
This is really important here. A lot of people don't realize this whole weather system, ice and snow, is going to affect Pad 3, which is the Gulf states, and Pad 1, which is along the East Coast. Now, along the East Coast, there are 3 different pads. Pad 1A, Pad 1B, Pad 1C. Might be 4. You have to double check. But you have multiple pads on the East Coast. So when you're shutting down the pad, when you're affecting oil production or oil refining or gas production, prices are going to go up. All right. So you can continue to ride this wave a little bit, but I think it's a little, gas prices are a little bit too rich right now. It's at 5.2. It might go to 6, might. But there's more probability of it going down after this cold spell. So that's why I'm shorting natural gas. Now, oil right now is trading at $61 a barrel. Again, without us going into Iran, it seems a little on the high side. Okay, with that, let's continue on with this. Let me just redo it here. Because I want to play the whole thing here.
Monster of a storm indeed. All of this being driven by some ridiculously cold weather settling in across the northern tier of the country. Initially, that's going to impact with some moisture, and boy, we are going to have a large-scale storm on our hands.
Right. So you have the snow. You have the snow line. So you have ice and snow, right? And it's affecting Pad 2 also in the Midwest. So you have Pad 2, Pad 3, and Pad 1. So this is serious, and this is the reason why the gas prices are skyrocketing. But it's going to go back down, trust me. It's going down fast.
Unbelievable. These are your wind chills, nearly negative 50 degrees in Minneapolis, negative 23 degrees in Chicago. That's what it feels like outside this morning. With that, we're waiting on this moisture to ultimately sweep through the country. I show you the national radar right now. Not a lot happening. Just a little bit of energy beginning to bubble up across the portions of the southwest right now. That will interact with that cold air. And as this entire system sweeps across the country, suddenly you're looking at most of it under some sort of winter weather advisory, winter storm warning, winter storm watch. A lot of folks are going to get in on this one as it is going to sweep from Texas all the way to the northeast. Now, I think ice is going to be the most damaging, the most deadly, the most dangerous of this entire situation. You're looking at areas here, in some cases, maybe an inch of ice, but even a quarter inch of ice, that's going to be enough to take down power lines. Dallas, over to Little Rock, getting up towards Nashville, and then getting right along the Mid-Atlantic. Those are the areas where the ice is going to be heaviest. We expect widespread power outages because of this. It'll bring down power lines, it'll bring down trees and branches over power lines, and that is when you start to lose power. Behind this year is really cold, so if we're talking about days and days of really cold weather without power, that of course could be very dangerous. Driving is going to be dangerous across these entire areas. Do expect widespread power outages from Texas all the way across the southern states. Now, it's just north of where that ice is. That is where we start to talk about snowfall. Snowfall is going to be a big part of this story as well. This pink color, these darker pink shades, we're talking 8 to 12 inches. That's including places like Oklahoma, so spots where you don't typically see that much snow. Louisville, southern Indiana, you could see some of this heavy snow. And then these purple colors, that's when you get in the mid-Atlantic and you get in the Northeast. I think widespread, maybe a foot of snow is possible in some of these locations. You do see some of those darker purples. That's indicating snow maybe as much as 2 feet. This is going to be a system we're tracking all the way into Monday. Those are the weather headlines. Carly.
Oh boy. This is obviously the number one thing on the minds of so many people, and for good reason. Thank you. So severe winter weather like this storm can turn everyday tech into a critical lifeline. Kirk Knudsen, the cyber guy, joins us now with tips on how to prepare. Kirk, thank you so much.
Carly, good to see you.
What should we be doing today?
You know, it's interesting.
All right. Let's listen into This Week in Oil dealing with the winter storm forecast. This was published a little yesterday.
As you've probably seen in the weather forecast, there's a huge winter storm bearing down on the center of the country. And my mind immediately went back to 2021. So in this special report, let's take a look at the freezes that hit Midland and Houston back in 2021 and how this current storm is at least forecast to compare to that. And then we'll go through some prices and some inventory changes and see what happened back in 2021. And if we had a similar result this year, what might happen as far as pricing and that sort of thing. So let's get into it.
Hey, before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver drops and lozenges. For the drops, you can get it in cherry flavor, in blueberry, and also in honey and lemon. Perfect for the cold season and the allergy season. Take them right away if you have that throat irritation. I also have structural nano silver lozenges in vitamin C, orange splash flavor, and manuka honey. So please go to my store, get a few bags for your household, use them for the winter season, use them for the allergy season, mitigate that throat irritation right away, super important. And you can take these prophylactically. If someone around you is not feeling well, start using them to protect your oral pharynx.
With over 30 years of experience in oil trading and analytics, I'm here to elevate your understanding of the oil market. So let's get into it. All right, so let's jump into it here. So I wanted to start off by comparing the forecast for the current storm coming in and the historical numbers that we saw back in 2021, the actual numbers from those storms. So what I've done here, the blue shaded area is the storm from 2021, and the lines are the current.
This season, you've got places to go, people to see, and things to do. You may have already gotten vaccinated for flu and COVID-19, but other
lines are the current forecast as I saw them, just a couple hours ago. So let's start through one thing here. I put in these little gray dotted lines. Hopefully you can see those. That's 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where water freezes. So that's a really important level for judging these storms, at least in terms of how production and refiners are going to be able to make it through this or not. So I wanted to add that little detail for us to look at really quickly. So the top is the Midland forecast, the bottom is the Houston forecast. On the left-hand side, I have the forward forecast. I think it's a 10-day forecast just from my iPhone, from what Apple's showing. And then on the right-hand side is Ventusky, which I believe is using the European model. They're fairly similar. The European model, if that is what Ventusky's using, is skewing a little bit colder. I think it usually tends to do that. But I wanted to put both of them there and sort of compare how the forecasts line up with what we saw back in 2021. So in terms of freezing. Back in 2021, we had numerous days in Midland below freezing. We actually got below zero as a low for one day. So that's well below the freezing mark there in Midland. And then sort of by the end of the storm, by day 10 or so, we started getting highs above freezing. And then by day 12, we had lows above freezing in terms of Midland. In the Houston area is a little bit different. We never got, we did get into the single digits. We never spent too much time below the freezing mark. I think so we got one high that was below freezing. The rest of the highs were above freezing during that time. And then the current forecast, at least from this whatever source the iPhone is using, is showing Houston highs above freezing the entire forecast, at least as we have it now, whereas Ventusky does have one day here below freezing in the Houston area. In terms of Midland, similar sort of thing. They have the iPhone has 2 days below that freezing mark where the highs don't get above freezing for 2 days. And then in using Ventusky, it's 3 days, but a little bit lower. So one key difference I think I really want to point out here is the temperatures going into this storm. So in the Houston area, we're supposed to be in the 70s the next couple of days, and then the storm hits. So that should give us a really warm, the earth should be fairly warm by the time this hits. So hopefully that will mute the impact maybe of at least damage to structures and underground pipes and that sort of thing. I'm thinking more about homeowners and swimming pools and that sort of thing. In terms of the refiners, remember the biggest problem was the power outages that happened. So I was just talking to our service provider here in the house, and he was reminding me, asking about the storm back in 2021, that what had happened is many of the power plants were running out of fuel themselves for various reasons, mostly because of ice and snow on the roads and everything being shut in. And that was the real danger and why ERCOT was starting to shut down power plants back then, because we were really worried that we'd actually run out of natural gas at the power plant level or run out of coal at the power plant level. That's why they started doing the rolling blackouts. And that's what really hurt the refining sector specifically, and a lot of the homes in the area. I know I had freezing damage in my house back in 2021 in that storm. So because water pipes were bursting and that sort of thing, because the heat was off, the electricity was off, therefore the heat was off, therefore the homes just aren't insulated down here like they are where I grew up in Colorado or spent time in Minnesota and the East Coast where things are built to resist winter temperatures, right? So that's a big difference, I think, coming into this storm. Just the ground should be a lot warmer. It's in terms of duration below freezing, it looks like we don't have as low of lows, if that makes sense, in the forecast anyway, versus what we had back in 2021 for both Midland and in the Houston area. So we'll see how this actually plays out. But so that's how the forecasts themselves line up. And now let's get into some actual numbers for you to look at here. So one thing is interesting. If we look at crude production in Texas and New Mexico, which is a bit of a shorthand way of looking at the Permian. Obviously, there's other formations in Texas besides the Permian. As far as New Mexico goes, nearly all of its crude production is Permian.
We're not here to follow the old rules of money. We're here to write the new ones. And when you money like us, we all win.
Nearly all of its crude production is Permian related. So that's what we're sort of trying to get to by putting these together. But I want to point out real quick that in January of 2021, we were at 5.3 million barrels per day for a combined Permian flow or quasi-Permian flow. So that's all of Texas and all of New Mexico production, 5.3 and change million barrels per day. The latest number we have is October from the monthly data set. And the astonishing thing to me in putting these numbers together is realizing that Texas by itself in October of 2025 was slightly above the 5.3 number that we just discussed here as being the total from New Mexico and Texas back in January of 2021. So just to give you a scale of how things have grown. So of course the light blue and the sort of light goldy yellow numbers are from 2021. So we can see production really got destroyed in the month of February. But again, we're looking at an average of February. The storm hit, depending on exactly who you're talking to, but between the 13th and 17th is when the storm was its worst. In terms of the storm itself, there was obviously ongoing issues from power sector and all that sort of thing. But from a crude oil perspective, again, looking just at Texas and New Mexico, it got hammered in February and then bounced right back and actually came in stronger in March and April, so stronger than that January number. So keep that in mind. That's an interesting detail there, and then slowly grew as the year went on, tapering off into Q4. That's not unheard of, tapering off in Q4. And then I have this number here, the dark blue and the darker golden color here is, again, like I said, October of 2025. So this is the most recent data point we've had. Back here in February, the Feb versus Jan delta was 970,000 barrels per day. Monthly average that we lost, if we use that same sort of percentage to production now, it would be closer to 1.375 million barrels per day, would be off if we had the same sort of impact just from a percentage change sort of thing. So keep that in mind. I think that's fairly interesting. Over here on the right-hand side, we have inputs into refineries. Again, so we're flipping back to a weekly now. Weekly type numbers. So as you can see, week 7 and 8 is when the storm hit. Again, it just really took out a lot of refining system in the Houston area. So we went from almost 8.5 million barrels per day in 2021 down to just above 3.5 million barrels per day within 2 weeks. So it was a lot of refining that got knocked off. It took a little bit to get back to that. We did get a sort of a V reversal in the first week after the low was made, but then you can see the rate of change was slower right as we exited this. And there was, I think, for instance, it was the Shell Deer Park at the time, maybe it was Pemex back then, but anyway, the Deer Park refinery had a lot of sort of ongoing issues and sort of drug things out longer than would expect. Now, given that the Houston system has been subject to a shock like that, does that mean they're set up better this time around? Maybe. Again, if the power goes up for an extended period of time, that just causes all sorts of trouble. You don't have steam tracing available to keep your lines heated and that sort of thing inside the refinery system. And keep in mind that for something like a complex refinery, have all these different units running, it's a very complicated system, right, to operate and to try to bring up and to bring down in an organized fashion, in an orderly fashion. And so in these things, when you have an event like this and you're trying to restart, sometimes you don't know until you actually try to restart that you have, pinhole leaks in various pipes or fittings or that sort of thing. So it's a bit frustrating to try to come back from an event like we had in 2021. You think everything looks fine, you try to start up the unit, and then you've got 3 or 4 pinhole leaks, in a pipeline connecting to it or something like that. And you have to shut the whole thing down again and go through the whole system of shutting it down. And then there's a whole process for doing those sorts of things. You don't just throw a simple switch. So keep that in mind on the refining sector. And then I wanted to give you this table real quick, just so you could see the changes. So I'm trying to cherry pick here that in terms of the price change and the inventory change, I'm just trying to pick from week 6. So we said that the storm in 2021 was right at the very end of week 7 and most of week 8, and then into week 9 is when you obviously had the ongoing impacts, especially in terms of refining. So what I'm doing here is starting at week 6 and then looking at however many weeks till we got within 18 weeks, right? So it's usually within 4, 5, 6 weeks of week 6. the maximum price change and the maximum inventory change. And so for crude oil, you'll see here in a second, this is a little bit interesting on crude oil.
HBO Max is available on YouTube. Enjoy the latest releases.
He's not your average kid.
Get more of your favorites on HBO Max.
This is a little bit interesting on crude oil, but the quick takeaway here from this table is that the gasoline market, the Gulf Coast conventional gasoline market, had the biggest percentage change in terms of price, whereas the diesel market had the biggest percentage change in terms of inventory over that time period. So let's take a look really quick at the price. So again, I'm using from the DOE, since they have this data available for us for free. It's pretty easy to use and to get to. The WTI Cushing price numbers that they have, again, if I'm just using these all, not mixing and matching or anything like that from a pricing perspective. But here we are up here currently, just under $60 now on that price that they have for us. If we look back here to 2021, this sort of reddish orangish line, you can see the market started to take off ahead of the storm, so maybe anticipating some issues going on and whatnot. Maybe we're seeing some of that right now with the current pricing situation going on. But then by week 7, that's when the storm really hit. Weeks 8 and 9, we came all the way up here and sort of peaked out around week 12, and then sort of flirted back to normal after that. Using 2019 as sort of a baseline, obviously we can't use 2021 because the prices just went nuts and demand, that whole mess from 2020. So my thought is using 2019 as maybe a baseline to sort of gauge things off of. So what I'm trying to say here is if we had a similar percentage change right now in price that we saw back in 2021, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying if we had that in that scenario, we get up almost to $70. So I would think about this again, if something happens and the price, the storm is bad and price takes off and the market rallies, and that's really the only thing going on during that time period, I would really start selling into it if we get up here around 70, because it's probably
selling into it.
Overreacting. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens here with this storm, but I would go into the storm.
What he just said is a strategy is what I'm doing for natural gas. But he's talking about for crude. Right now, I have a short in crude oil and a long. I have a hedge strategy.
Thinking this is a bullish situation, I want to buy crude now. I would go in with the mindset that, okay, we get close to 70, I'm definitely dumping this thing. I'm definitely going to get out. Okay, so just to put it in context for you. In terms of inventory, like I said, in 2021, we drew down inventories pretty well into week 8, and then all the refining system went down. So you're talking, 3.5-4 million barrels per day of refining demand that went offline, and we built very quickly after that. So that's why I said crude's a little bit interesting. It's going to be a different profile than you're going to see here in the products here in just a second. So keep that in mind too on the crude. So you might ask them, why did crude oil prices rally so much during that time if crude inventories were actually building after week 8? Well, the short answer is the crude oil market, the crude oil futures, is a much deeper market than the refined products. And it's a little bit less precise, if you will, and more of a catch-all. So if, I think it would be perfectly appropriate if you wanted to play this from the bullish side by trading WTI futures or USO or something like that. Again, just sort of that catch-all. You don't have to get super specific about, Gulf Coast diesel or anything, but we are going to walk through those numbers here for you. On the gasoline side, similar ideas, prices here on the left, inventories here on the right. You can see from an inventory perspective how quickly we dropped off because we had so much refining capacity offline. Again, I'm just looking at Gulf Coast at PADD 3 gasoline inventories, not nationwide. If we were to get a similar situation on gasoline where we had all these refineries go out, we would expect inventories to drop down to this 81 million barrel mark. Again, I think that would be an extraordinary case, probably not the base case. Same thing on gasoline prices. If you were to trade gasoline prices from the long side going into this, around this 250 mark, 251, you probably want to start taking profit. But you can see how in 2021 we pretty much paralleled the upward move that was going on in 2019 and accelerated a little bit faster, or maybe a little bit sooner if you want to look at it that way, from week 7 or 8 than it did in 2019. But then by the time we got to week 12 and most of the refining system was back to normal again, then prices stayed pretty close to 2019 type prices back then. So I think that makes a lot of sense, especially with looking at it from the inventory point of view. We drew down a lot of inventory, but slowly caught back up to 2019 sorts of inventories, and that's about the same time we saw prices start to cool off a little bit. On the, oh, that's funny. On the
switch to TurboTax. File free in the app.
Oh, that's funny. On the U.S. Gulf Coast ultra low sulfur diesel, I need to take that gasoline label out of there. Similar sorts of things happened. The price increase in 2019 seemed fairly gradual, seemed a little more aggressive in 2021, especially around this week 7 or 8, going all the way up into week 10 or so, when we basically caught up to 2019 in terms of prices again, and then started to come back off a little bit. So the upside goal on distillate, if you wanted to trade like a heating oil future, again, we're looking at the Gulf Coast numbers right now, so you'd have to be trading like the LT contract as a differential, plus heating oil on the NYMEX. If you're interested in that, please ping me and let me know. I can give you more information on that. But at any rate, going just above $2 here to around $2.38 or so. Again, about a 16% increase in price. And from an inventory perspective, things came down pretty hard, after that week 9 that we saw, with runs being so low. And then actually this sort of started to climb back up a little bit, which is good. So, kind of coming out of heating demand season and that sort of thing. Inventory never did drop down to 2019 type levels, and we are starting off now at similar inventory levels in 2026 to what we saw back in 2021. We're just not building it like we did back in that time. And again, if a storm comes in and really causes disruptions, we're not going to get this sort of seasonal build in inventory. We didn't really get that either in gasoline. But at any rate, moving on to propane really quickly. Similar sorts of things. Propane prices are very low because inventories are very high at this point in time. So this is maybe the mildest of all the changes. If we were to get a huge impact like we got back in 2021 across the whole system, especially back in the Permian, or in the producing regions of the U.S., then we could see propane prices at Mont Belvieu sort of pop up here to 68 cents or so, probably be a big seller at that point as well. And you can see inventories, we're way up here right now. A similar drawdown in inventories that we saw in 2021 would put us at about 55 million barrels or so, which again is super high. So even if we did get obliterated on the refining side and production gets stymied because of this storm, inventories would still be relatively high if we had a similar result in terms of the percentage change in inventories as we did back in 2021. So I just wanted to run you through that really quick so you could have something to talk about, some sort of gauge to be able to look at those numbers and look at the current.
All right, so dissecting or digesting his information, assuming that there's no hit on Iran anytime soon by the United States, and there is a similar effect in Pad 3 as in 2021, then we should see oil futures start to go up. It's trading at 60.91. High intraday trading in the European session was 61.26. He's projecting potential $69 a barrel. Right, so you're talking about moving about $8 I think that if we hit Iran, we're going to see a $4 or $5 hit, it increase, and then it'll come back down really quick. There's an awful lot of oil on the market right now. So it being offline, if production was offline, similar to 2021, then you're just burning down an already elevated inventory level. Now, it's all about not fundamentals, it's about really behavior. Oil could go up, but then come back down again. So I'm not sure if it's going to do an $8 move. I think it's going to be more of a, maybe a $3 move. But still, it being at $65 a barrel, that's really high for this trading range. All right, and then you're going into the spring, and so I suspect that Trump wants to suppress oil prices, right? So all it takes is just asking Saudi Arabia to produce more barrels. So there's a lot of market manipulation going on in the oil market. My gut feeling on this is that we're not going to be at the $70 range or the 68, 69 range for crude. I think we may see a 65, but then it's going to come back down. And I think that the real trading range is around 61, as low as about 57 or 56 as we get past this storm. All right. So if you're really super, short-term trading, longing oil, you may make some money on it, maybe $2, $3, right? But the bigger play would be wait until it goes up, because there's higher probability of, if it goes up, that it's going to come back down. So right now, I do have a hedge strategy in oil, but I'd like to unwind the long and just wait for oil to drop after we get past the storm. Now, you're going to see the effects of this in natural gas faster than in oil. So right now, natural gas is trading at 5.3. It may go as high as 6. But the thing is it's going to drop fast right when the weather starts to improve. So that's the key. It's almost like, do you want to just wait it out? It's just like really almost trading volatility. You're trading volatility, and then the volatility of the market because of the weather. The weather is going to get better. That's guaranteed. The weather is going to get better, and then the price is going to drop. So that's how I'm playing it. All right, with equities, it's trading at 6,923. Again, major resistance level at 7,000 for the S&P 500. Okay, let's listen into Fox. No, let's listen into Bloomberg.
Interest rates at 10%. And, it goes back even farther for several years. Jamie Dimon has said things over the years that were critical of Trump and then walked them back. So I think there is a little bit of tension between the two. So, it may be as simple as that, just trying to sort of poke him in the eye a little and then maybe bring him to the table to some sort of settlement.
We also know that the Trump, his company, or his companies have also sued other companies like Capital One, BBC, the New York Times. Have any of those come to anything?
So, the one that is most analogous is the one against Capital One. The claims are almost identical, but we don't have a definitive ruling in that case. Like the JP Morgan case, the Capital One case was filed in Florida state court. That actually got removed to federal court for sort of arcane reasons that only lawyers appreciate. So I won't bore you with it. But I don't think JP Morgan is going to have the same reasons for removing it to federal court. So I think the JP Morgan case may stay in state court. But in the Capital One case, we're waiting for a decision from the court on Capital One's motion to dismiss, which I think will be informative with respect to the JP Morgan case.
All right, Elliot, thanks so much for your appreciate it. You can send the bill directly to John Tucker. Elliot Stein, Bloomberg Intelligence litigation analyst.
please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract is dual purpose. It's going to help to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and helps your lipid profile, so you're reducing plaque formation. Magnesium and zinc will help with brain function, help with the efficacy of vitamin D3, and boost up your immune system. Take it every day, especially in the winter season. And clarity factor is a very powerful neurostat that allows you to concentrate. It will help to improve your memory. Over time, you're going to improve the dendritic connection, so you're thinking faster and have better memory. Take it every day, drink it with filtered water, and you'll be able to concentrate better on tasks. And omega-3. Omega-3 is super important for cardiovascular health. Brings down inflammation and helps the lipid profile. It stacks really well with the olive leaf extract. So please go to my store, use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, you get $5 off any order. All right, let's listen into Hochul, talking about the storm that's coming.
Nickel, copper, cobalt, and other critical metals are the backbone of electric vehicles and battery storage. Alaska Energy Metals.
First of all, I want to acknowledge Acting Commissioner of the Department of Homeland Security Emergency Services, Terry O'Leary, Commissioner of the DOT, Marie-Therese Dominguez, Executive Director of the New York State Thruway Authority, Frank Corr, Major Robert McConnell from New York State Police, and Jackie Bray, the Director of State Operations. And there's only one reason we're gathered here this morning, is to send out the alarm. Alert all New Yorkers that we are heading into a very, very dangerous weather event that is unfolding later today and throughout this weekend into Monday, throughout every corner of the state. No state will be immune from feeling the effect of Mother Nature's wrath on this weekend. So we warned about an extreme weather event yesterday. That event has arrived. It's intensifying as we speak. Now, we're used to winter in New York. We're in Albany today. I'm from Buffalo. Was in New York City yesterday. We think we're ready for this. But when you get complacent, that's when you get into trouble. So I'm here to say this is a very dangerous combination of heavy snow and extreme, extreme cold temperatures. And the risks are so intense that as I'm standing here right now, I'm declaring a state of emergency throughout the entire state of New York. And what that'll allow us to do is to coordinate more closely with local governments, deploy state resources into municipalities without the lag of time required. So this will ensure that all of our local partners and agencies have the resources they need to keep New Yorkers safe and to get through this weather event. Allows us to suspend certain laws that would be other related to procurement, etc. So right now, here's the bad news. Temperatures across New York are plummeting. By tomorrow night, we'll be experiencing some of the most dangerous cold we've seen in years. And if you're heading up to the North Country or live in that beautiful part of our state, you better bundle up. You'll be experiencing minus 40 to minus 50 degree wind chills. The rest of the state, real field temperatures will feel like below zero tonight and tomorrow. Down to negative minus 20 all across the I-90 corridor from Buffalo to Albany will feel like it's below zero and also down minus 20. And even in downstate, the temperature will feel like minus 10, Hudson Valley, minus 10 in New York City and Long Island. And that is not something that part of our state is accustomed to. So what are you worried about? What am I worried about? Frostbite. Frostbite can set in literally within 5.
You know what I'm worried about? I want natural gas to spike. I'm gonna buy more shorts for the futures market, and then I'm gonna, and then when natural gas starts to plummet, make a ton of money. That's what I'm worried about. I'm telling you on how to make money from the news. Don't worry about frostbite. Worry about the movement of natural gas.
Of exposure as well as hypothermia. So the conditions The symptoms of hypothermia are poor coordination, slurred speech, exhaustion, shivering. Let's first of all try to prevent being in this situation, but if you must be outside and you're with other people, pay attention to those signs because that means they're experiencing a serious health event. So we got the extreme cold. Bundle up. Let's talk about the volume of snow. We're seeing lake effect snow falling off of Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. The Tug Hill area of our state and Watertown will see 1 to 2 feet off of Lake Erie, up to 18 inches in the southern tier. Buffalo, only 4 to 6. I'm not sure they'll even notice. Buffalo's prepared. But we're tracking another large storm system. It can begin impacting New York as early as Saturday night. Snow is expected all day, Saturday into Sunday into Monday. And also our forecasts have been upgraded or downgraded depending on your perspective. We're expecting more snow than they were talking about even 24 hours ago. So pay attention to these totals. 12 to 18 inches of snow possible across Long Island, New York City, Hudson Valley, Capital Region, Southern Tier, Mohawk Valley, and Central New York. The rest of the state could see upwards of 1 foot of snow. Now, up to 1 foot of snow downstate, it could be paralyzing in a dense area like New York City. They have not seen snow totals like this in years. But the good news is one good side of this is I always ask about what are the winds expected to be? Because if you have the combination of snow that is falling, but also high winds or hurricane force winds, as we've seen in many of our blizzards, that creates a condition of extreme whiteouts. That's when you cannot see on the New York State Thruway. That's when people are more at risk of going off the road or into a ditch. So the good news is we don't expect a high volume of winds throughout the state, but there will be surges, squalls of upwards of 25 to 35 miles an hour. So that can happen. Let's talk about how we can protect people. I've authorized all state employees to work remotely on Monday. I encourage other employers to do the same, just to keep people off the roads. And think about this, the fewer people on the roads, the more our great team led by Commissioner Dominguez can be out there salting and clearing the snow and making the roads safer for those, particularly emergency vehicles that must be out there.
This AI can forecast U.S. stock prices to the penny. This is where it says NVIDIA stock will close tomorrow. You can view this forecast right now.
All right. Well, that's Governor Hochul. Let's listen into Live Now.
And welcome back to Live Now from Fox, taking a live look there at our XRAD radar system. More than 235 million people across more than 40 states from Arizona to Maine are in the path of a potentially historic winter storm that's expected to extend over 2,000 miles. It could bring crippling snow and ice. We do want to check in with our Fox team here. We do have Bane Froning live in Dallas, Texas, as well as Robert Moses live in New York. We're going to head out to Robert first. Robert, what is the city doing there to prepare?
Well, good morning to you. Plenty. That is the answer. We're here at a Long Island Railroad facility where later on this morning workers will be loading salt onto trucks to distribute to railroad facilities across the area. Just one example of what's being done here to prepare for this storm. Salt sheds will certainly be hives of activity. Starting today, Mayor Zoran Mamdani says all highways, major streets, and bike lanes will be pre-treated with brine to reduce snow and ice accumulation. Then starting tomorrow morning, about 2,000 sanitation workers will begin working 12-hour shifts around the clock. 700 salt spreaders will be deployed starting tomorrow night. The mayor, schools chancellor, and other city officials will be holding a storm briefing later on this morning at Emergency Management Headquarters in Brooklyn. We are waiting to hear precisely what will happen with school here in New York City on Monday.
We are working to do everything that we can to keep our schools open. Parents feel one way about this, students feel very differently about this. What I want to make sure, however, is that we are making a decision that does not have a massive impact on people's day-to-day lives.
The storm poses the first big test for Mamdani. History is filled with examples of mayors here and elsewhere who botched snowstorm preps or cleanups. Think about Bill de Blasio in 2018, whose administration did not anticipate a pretty big November storm, which left roads impassable. Mike Bloomberg in 2007 had to forgive tickets that were given to car owners who couldn't move their cars because of all the snow and ice. So the question is, does Mamdani think about that history?
What I'm thinking more about is how can I do every single thing in my power to make this as seamless of an experience for New Yorkers as possible. And
Let's get
I
this
think
straight.
it's only right.
Let's get this straight. He said 2007? But there was also Snowmageddon, I think, which was 2010. But let's say 2007. Now, Mamdani's 31. I thought he was 31 years old. Right? And it's 2026 minus 2007. That's what they said about Bloomberg. That was 19. That was 19 years ago. He would have been only 12 years old. He can't remember Snowmageddon. Or if he barely remembers it.
New Yorkers judge their leaders by their ability to deliver for them in the most day-to-day aspects of their life.
The fact that most of the snow will fall on the weekend means people can get out and enjoy it. The mayor has enjoyed snow in his day. He recalled a sledding experience, though, that went a bit awry.
We hit the jump. I was supposed to be on the back. We hit the jump so well that I ended up being in front. And my friend landed on my head. And I got a concussion and I went to the hospital. And I turned out mostly okay.
So let's hope there are no concussions during this snowstorm up here. But to be sure, the city is doing plenty of prep work today so that everything's in place for the weekend ahead of what could be a foot or more of snow here in New York City. Back to you.
All right, Robert Moses with Fox 5 New York. Thank you so much for checking in with us. Now we're going to head out to Bane Froney because we do know, Bane, that Dallas, Texas, they could be seeing some weather there as well. Is that right?
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The snowstorm is serious, but if you pay attention, you can make money on the snowstorm. All right? Please go to my store and get the Cleanse Max 35 or Max 14. They will help to boost up your immune system. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Max 14 is 14 parts per million. Amazing how the name tells you how many parts per million. And Cleanse is 30 parts per million. They're at different price points, but they will help to improve your oral cavity, neutralize. And when you have an improved oral cavity, you're boosting up your immune system. This will also help with your oral pharynx, back of your throat. You're boosting up your immune system, and with a good oral cavity health, you've neutralized, and you're helping your cardiovascular health. Because bacteria getting into your bloodstream can cause plaque formation and problems with your valves in your heart. So what you want to do is have good oral hygiene. Please go to my store, get the Cleanse, Max 35 or Max 14. Take it every day. I've been doing this for more than 5 years. Take it every day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20-30 seconds, and then swallow it. This is going to help the health of your epithelial lining, maintain a mucosal barrier, and boost up your immune system. Vitamin D3, super important during the winter season. It also helps to get cells to go into apoptosis if they've been infected. Vitamin D3 is a gene expression cofactor, so your cells perform properly. And vitamin D3, when doing resistance training and taking calcium, will help to build denser bone. I have deodorants that are dual purpose on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can get it in citrus. You can also get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. These deodorants are for males or for females, and they're dual purpose. Use it as a daily deodorant, but it will help to detoxify your body. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Very high quality ingredients. You can't get a better deodorant. And collagen. Collagen is a new product on my store that will help to remodel your joints. All right? If you have joint pain in your shoulders or elbows or knees or hips, wherever, your hands, doesn't matter, get the collagen, and what this will do is help to remodel the joint. it helps remodel that joint by using collagen 2 and ACAN, which helps to cushion the joint. So it's helping to remodel the joint at the cartilage level and at the joint cushioning level. Collagen also helps to reduce the pain. How? By inhibiting EP4. All right? Also, by inhibiting MMP3 and MMP13, you're reducing the erosion of the joint. So this helps to remodel, rebuild the joint, and stop the erosion and stop the pain. In addition, this helps to recruit glucosamine and chondroitin to help to remodel the joint as well. It's very important to take if you've had a sports injury or you're just getting older. You can stack this with the collagen powder for synergistic results. So please go to my store and get the collagen, a very high quality product. And I just told you how to improve your joints. Let's continue.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, the system, it begins right here. I mean, right now it's 50 degrees currently here in Dallas, Texas. But believe it or not, in 24 hours, we're going to be in the low 20s. Those temperatures are going to take a very quick dive later on tonight. So as we move throughout the day today, conditions are mild in Texas, but by the time we get into around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, those temperatures really begin to drop, and we'll have rain at first, and that will end up shifting over into freezing rain and sleet here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area as we move throughout the night and overnight hours into our Saturday, potentially seeing half an inch to almost an inch of ice accumulating in areas throughout Texas, as well as into Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi. So it is going to be much of the country that's going to be dealing with this. Now, I do want to jump into some of those preps that have already been going on here in Texas so far. We've seen shelves in grocery stores almost completely emptied out. Folks are getting prepared. They are ready to stay home for this weekend, and that is honestly what officials are hoping for. TxDOT has also been treating the roadways with brine and salt for the past few days, preparing for that as well. Now, folks at home, maybe you're in the Texas area, may be thinking to themselves, hey, it's going to rain first. Is that going to be impacting the roads that have already been treated? Thankfully, no. We are going to be only seeing a little bit of rain before we start to see that transition into ice. But to that point, you know, Governor Greg Abbott has been very vocal about his concerns about what's upcoming and held a presser just yesterday about all of his concerns and briefed the media on what needs to be done in order to keep everyone safe. He did mention, staying home was the main focus and the main goal of this, and keeping everyone safe and comfortable throughout this entire event. Here's what he had to say.
One of the most dangerous ways in which you can expose your life to harm is if you make the decision to get out on a roadway that's already had precipitation on it that's frozen. When you're driving, when you have slick ice or something like that, you may not be able to see it with your eyeball, but when your tire goes across it, you lose control of your car, and it can cause harm to you, harm to others.
And it does not take a lot of ice to cause some serious problems on the roadways. But not only this, it's going to be the power lines as well. We're going to see that accumulation occurring there. Again, half an inch is going to be possible throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Farther up north, we'll probably see a little bit more of that wintry mix plus snow potential on top of it as well. So with this, with that accretion of ice on the roadways as well as on the power lines, that could cause some serious power outages, major power outages, not only here in Texas, but throughout the South as well. So folks are on high alert, especially here in Texas. When looking back in 2021, we had that major freeze that impacted the state in February. Scary conditions, not going to be what's happening here with this event, but it does have a lot of people on edge. So for folks here in Texas, they're preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Bane Brony, Fox Weather will be checking in with your team as well throughout the coming days. And thank you so much for joining us on Live Now from Fox. My name is Christy Mattino. Before we head away for a commercial break, I did want to ask you at home, what's your biggest concern about this week?
All righty, let's see what's going on. Let's listen into Bloomberg here.
Conservative than some of our competitors. We're thinking the district in Baltimore 8 to 12, New York City 8 to 14,
Boston 10-16, but southeastern Massachusetts 8-14. That's the big if still with this storm. Now, somebody in New England is going to do really well. They'll end up with 18 inches somewhere around the Boston area. And also north of New York City, lower Hudson, mid-Hudson River Valley, they could be between 12 and 18 inches from the storm. That's two of the areas that may jackpot based upon this track.
I think meteorologists have a different definition of doing well
Exactly.
than residents in some of those places. Okay, up to 18 inches in some of the
The
parts.
ski resorts up
north
there,
of here.
I feel really happy with because they don't always get the snow.
Yeah, it's been a very good season so far, and it's only late January.
Yeah, so
I mean, they've got February to come, and that's when they make their money.
Up here in the Northeast. Rob Carolyn, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Rob Carolyn, he's a Bloomberg meteorologist, giving us the latest on the storm coming through the country. And again, if you look at it on the map, and it just takes almost over at least half the country, it looks like, going across west to east. So we'll keep an eye on that. Davos has been front and center in terms of the geopolitical front, and I'm going to put some other issues like Ukraine, Russia, maybe a little bit on the back burner here over the last week or so. Let's try to get the latest reporting from there. We're joined by Tyler Kendall, Bloomberg's Washington correspondent. Tyler, we had Mr. Zelensky come yesterday to Davos, made his case, harsh terms for the European leaders. But again, it was this week. This kind of got overshadowed by all the Greenland discussion. What is the latest on Ukraine, Russia, maybe getting some type of peace process moving?
Yeah, hey, Paul. Well, it is our understanding Russian state media confirmed within the last hour that trilateral talks between the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia have begun. They're taking place in Abu Dhabi. Now, these are at the technical level, not the leader level. It's on our understanding that military officials from Ukraine and Russia are involved, but these are the first known talks where all three sides have been in the room, so that is considered to be progress, though we know that they are far apart on some of those big main sticking points, most notably what is going to happen when it comes to the potential for land concessions in Ukraine. Just yesterday, we had Special Envoy Steve Witkoff make his 7th face-to-face visit with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin, and afterwards we heard from Russian spokespeople who said that ultimately it is the territory issue, as they called it, that remains unresolved. And that is going to be a really key part of these discussions. The Ukrainian President Zelensky came out and spoke to reporters earlier today. He called the eastern part of Ukraine, the Donbas region, as key in his words. So that's where these discussions are focused on now, because Paul and Scarlett, in recent weeks, we actually have seen some pretty steady progress when it comes to another main sticking point. Those are those U.S.-backed security guarantees after really what had been months of this administration saying that there were going to be implicit guarantees, is what we often heard, that the U.S. was going to have this vested economic interest in Ukraine because of that critical minerals deal that was signed. But ultimately, it does seem like they have made significant progress when it comes to U.S.-backed security guarantees. And if you ask U.S. officials, they keep telling us that we're getting closer to putting pen to paper, signing documents. They say we're 90% of the way there. But if you listen to both sides, it does still sound like we're pretty far apart.
By the way, this was Steve Witkoff's 7th visit to Vladimir Putin in the past year. So a lot of miles. Absolutely. So, Tyler, we've heard about how Ukraine has, given some way. The U.S. has also given some way when it comes to security guarantees. What about Russia? Has it made any concessions?
No, at this point, Russia has been taking this hard-line stance, more maximalist demands, Scarlett. And importantly, earlier this week, we heard from Russian President Vladimir Putin saying that he would be willing to use the frozen Russian assets to help rebuild Ukraine. And at first, that seemed to have been touted like he was putting something on the table. But as we heard from the Ukrainian President Zelensky, he really slammed that announcement from the Russian president, saying that it's not up to him to decide how those funds are going to be used, considering that they are currently frozen. So it's been interesting to sort of track the back and forth rhetoric, if you will, as this continues to evolve. But to Paul's point earlier about how we really saw Zelensky in this speech that our Bloomberg redhead characterized as him tearing into European allies, a lot of that had to do with Zelensky alleging that Europe hasn't done enough to go after Russia and to get them to come to the negotiating table in a more meaningful way. He cited the European sanctions regime, for example, going after Russia's shadow fleet when it comes to oil tankers. And there was this emergency meeting yesterday in Brussels of European leaders
where it will be interesting to see what sort of perhaps more enforcement mechanisms they may put on the table to your point, perhaps get Russia to negotiate a little bit more when it comes to these potential agreements.
How important is it to President Trump and to this administration to achieve peace in the Ukraine? At one point, it seemed really important, but as often happens with this president, his attention goes to another topic. Where is it right now, do you think?
Well, it appears there's going to be this renewed focus, Paul. I mean, Zelensky made the point in his speech that there has been this distraction when it comes to Greenland. And then we saw this emergency leaders meeting convened of European leaders yesterday, originally to address Greenland. But since it appears that has been resolved, we heard leaders come out afterwards saying they want to renew this focus. Now, there has been mounting frustration from the White House that there hasn't been as speedy a resolution when it comes to the war in Ukraine. But you saw President Trump yesterday meeting with the Ukrainian President Zelensky on the sidelines of Davos in what appeared to be a last-minute addition, since Zelensky had previously said that he was unlikely to attend the World Economic Forum. And afterwards, speaking to reporters, President Trump characterized their meeting as good, but he said they didn't really talk about anything new when it came to potential conditions that could be on the table. He says they're talking a lot about the same sort of issues over and over again, but it was important to him to hear from Ukrainian President Zelensky how badly he wants this deal to come together, which of course we know both sides have really been clamoring for. So I think you're going to start to hear a lot more about Ukraine as some of these other issues that have been dominating the headlines seem to be receding, at least for now.
Seem to be receding, at least for now. You're referring, of course, to Greenland, this framework deal that the President and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte had talked about. Do we know anything more about this framework deal? Because Denmark says it's not an agreement yet.
Right, and our own reporting indicates, Scarlett, that a lot of the things that are on the table for this deal actually weren't really struck in Davos. They were struck last week, where we saw this delegation come here to Washington, meet with Trump administration officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and officials from Denmark and Greenland. And it's likely going to include some sort of agreement that's going to allow the U.S. to have a little bit more of a military presence in the Arctic, perhaps stationing some missiles there. And then another critical part of this is going to be U.S. involvement when it comes to Ukraine's critical mineral development, which we know is going to take a lot of investment in infrastructure. But you hear President Trump talk about this agreement in terms of it's going to be very long lasting, which has led our analysts to say that he's likely referring to a many years long lease when it comes to rights to the natural resources in Greenland. But as we heard yesterday from the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, they did not discuss the issue of sovereignty when it comes to Greenland. Of course, that had been perhaps what we thought this was all going to be about. So there's still a lot of ways we have to fill in.
All right, Tyler Kendall, I think we covered it all. Tyler Kendall is Bloomberg's Washington correspondent on Russia, Ukraine, and on Greenland, joining us from our Washington, D.C. bureau. We are looking at markets that are mixed right now, at least when it comes to equities. Small caps are lower for a change. They have been outperforming big caps for the past past 6 months, in fact. The S&P just slightly higher.
All right. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,930. VIX is at 15. Natural gas is at 5.2. It's having a problem getting above the 5.35 range. And oil is trading at $60.95 a barrel. All right, let's listen in to Jack Keane on Fox News.
This and more is retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst, chairman of the Institute of Study Award, General Jack Keane. General, there were talks yesterday between Witkoff, Kushner, and a member of the Board of Peace. Now they're going to move these talks over to Abu Dhabi. The Witkoff says we're down to one major issue. Do you see progress according to your sources?
Well, I think there has been some progress when you look back to 2 months with the 28-point deal, which certainly favored Russia, and where we got down to 20 points, and then the progress since that time, in the ensuing 7 weeks or so. I do think there's been some progress made, to get down to what is now publicly announced is one issue, and it deals with the land and likely the Donbass region. So yeah, that's certainly progress, and a lot of work had to be done on the security guarantees, in terms of how do we make certain that Russia is deterred from a future attack if there is a peace agreement, and so that it enduring and lives beyond the Trump administration, and certainly being approved by the Congress of the United States and the other parliaments that are participating as the coalition of the willing is one of the major factors in all that. So that took a lot of work. But I think, where are we really? I mean, I think we're kind of where we have always been. I mean, 11 months ago, Zelensky said yes to a ceasefire, temporary, unconditional. And Putin has never agreed to that. And certainly we've been working on the big peace agreement, not the small ceasefire, in all of these months. And he has been the obstacle. And we're reading in the public media that coming out of Moscow, he did not budge on any concessions on the land. But the uniqueness of the meeting in Abu Dhabi in the UAE is that all three parties are participating, the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia together, as opposed to being separate. So if that happens, is there going to be some concessions made there? Remains to be seen. I'm highly skeptical. I think Russia is about stalling with negotiations and continuing to stall, promise that we will make a deal. We're real sincere about it. But at the end of the day, no deal. That's where we have been with Mr. Putin.
Yeah, and by the way, General, I want to move on and get some Iran in, but I do want to point out that President Zelensky just ripped Europe yesterday. He said, what are you going to do if Lithuania is invaded? Anything? What did you do in 2020 when Belarus rose up against Lukashenko? Anything? Nothing. What are you still buying oil from Russia? When are you going to act when it comes to Iran? So he just kind of had it. He goes, you spend all your time trying to change Trump. But what is Trump doing? Trump is coming up with a peace plan in Gaza. He's the one shuttling back and forth trying to bring a peace plan to Russia. He's the one who's got to deal with Iran. I see nothing from Europe, and Zelensky echoes that. Speaking of that, President Trump was asked about Iran yesterday, and he says, we're sending an armada their direction, but he goes, I don't know if we're going to have to use it. Do you think we're going to have to use it? And do you think we should?
Well, first of all, just dealing with what you were introducing there, Zelensky is very frustrated with the Europeans, particularly over the frozen $300 billion Russian assets that they won't release that would significantly help him economically, to be sure. And also the fact that they're still buying Russian oil and they won't help to take down the shadow fleet that Russia is using to sell their oil on the open market and get around the sanctions that are being imposed on them. And the rest of the things that you added on, it adds to his frustration with them. But in terms of Iran, the president said he was going to hold them accountable for killing their own people. Conservative human rights organizations say anywhere from 5,000 to about 16,000 have been killed. And we know there's 22 to 26,000 in prison. And likely as soon as the spotlight is removed from Iran, they will systematically begin to hang them, just like they did when we had 22,000 in prison after the June war, the 12-day war, and they hung 1,500. That, I think, is the path we're on. Yes, the president should use the military capability here to further weaken this regime, which is at the weakest point it's ever been in 45 plus years, politically, economically, militarily. And that would support the protesters. I think they would be back out on the street again after a strike, to be sure. The president has said that he's interested in changing the leadership in Iran. And I believe a strike will put it on a path to the regime collapsing. And I think that's necessary. The option is obviously on the table with the assets being moved into the region. And so we'll see where we are. I believe the president is a person of his word. He said he was going to do it. I'm assuming he's going to do it.
All right, General, we'll keep our eye on it. We'll certainly have the firepower there. Surely, and Israel has plenty of time to get ready and get into defensive posture, too. General Jack Keane, thank you.
I'm Steve Juicy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
Now in theaters. I need to find out who killed my wife.
The clock is ticking.
All right, we're going to go to CNBC talking about hypersonic missiles by Castellion, CEO. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow it to be excreted from your body within about 6 to 8 hours. All right? Take 3 small drops every day. Drink it with filtered water. And what you'll notice is that your endocrine system and your immune system will improve. Detoxifying your body regularly is super important. In addition, you'll notice that you'll get less brain fog. A lot of people don't realize that toxins in your environment at home cause brain function issues. So it's important to clean your environment, clean your basement and your garage. Keep, if you don't need certain types of chemicals in your home, get rid of them. If you do need them or cleaning supplies, then make sure that they are in a double layered container so you're not slowly breathing in those chemicals and toxins. So take the zeolite every day, 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink it with filtered water, and it will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. Boost up that immune system and help with your endocrine system.
Castellion broke ground this week on a 1,000-acre hypersonic manufacturing campus in New Mexico. And joining us right here on set, fresh off that groundbreaking, Brian Hargis, CEO of Castellion and also co-founder. It's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks for having me on Squawk Box.
All right, let's talk about this groundbreaking and what you're going to be building.
Well, Castellion is focused on hypersonics, and this is going to be one of the most important capabilities in the American arsenal. Hypersonics go far, they go fast, they're very hard to shoot down. It's going to allow America to fight at a distance from safety. And this is why this is one of the Department of War's top priorities.
So how quickly can you stand up this facility and how quickly can you start manufacturing?
Wait, can we stop? How fast is hypersonic?
Typically Mach 5 and above. So 5 times the speed of sound.
How much?
5 times the speed of sound.
3,500 miles an hour. Sorry, I didn't want to just.
They're maneuverable.
At sea level.
Said they're hard to shoot down. This is the whole. We're going to get into this, but this is the whole pretext behind Golden.
Sorry, just before that, how fast the factory goes up, I want to know how fast the missiles go.
Yeah. Well, I want to know how fast the missiles can get made.
Yeah.
Well, that is actually the most critical thing about this. So deterrence is manufacturing. And so our Project Ranger site out in New Mexico, 1,000 acres, is going to be the largest dedicated hypersonic production facility, I believe, in the world. We're doing that so that we can get that up and running this year so that we can start producing munitions in the thousands, but at a cost point that the Department of War can afford to buy thousands, which has been a big problem to date.
Do you already have contracts with them?
We do. We have contracts with all 3 major service branches.
So when we talk about some of these hypersonic capabilities, what are your stats and what does this do to close that gap? First, a little bit of a history lesson. Hypersonic capability is an American capability, and then we sort of dropped the ball on it, and China and Russia swooped in and got ahead of us in terms of building out that capability, and now we're essentially
never have
to have this, right?
That's 100% correct. It's not a technology problem. The U.S. has been doing this first, and we've been doing it for a very long time. The issue has been producing at scale and reducing the cost to a level that you can have these systems deployed in the field and have meaningful numbers to deter.
I got so many questions. What allows a missile to go hypersonic, and how much slower are the other missiles we use?
So, common missile in the inventory, Tomahawk, that's a cruise missile. It's
Yeah, we like the
subsonic.
Tomahawk.
We do like Tomahawk.
That's below the speed of sound.
That's correct. That's correct. So flies kind of like an airliner.
So what do you do to this thing to make it go hypersonic?
So what we're doing,
Can't you tell me?
we have, no, I can tell you.
Okay.
So this is actually one of the reasons why this is so important. So a hypersonic system has a lot of energy, flies very fast, but it skips around off the top of the atmosphere, goes very, very far, and therefore can get through enemy air defenses, and you can pull targets at risk from a very long way.
Okay, Booker, just one more question. The administration is talking about this idea about the ability of defense companies to procure things ahead of time.
Yes.
How much of a big deal is that for your company if they do that? But taking on more risk, right?
Well, so we have raised almost $500 million in capital from fantastic partners like Andreessen Horowitz, Lightspeed, Altimeter. The most important thing is to get the production, because as Morgan mentioned, that's what matters. Your ability to produce these both ahead of a conflict, but even during a conflict. That's always been what determines the outcome of a war.
Alaska and
Your website says that, and I want to say I love the military. Love my dad, 9 years, 10 years, Navy. But why? Your website says we spend too much on defense.
Yes.
With all due respect to the military, why do we spend so much on defense? The $1,000 toilet seat, all the stuff that people hear about that may or may not be true. Why is defense spending so high?
So in the military, you want your equipment to work. And so there's a lot of focus on the requirements and how reliable the equipment is. And that's driven a certain design and development practice that has increased the cost, increased the timeline to an almost unacceptable level. Because Stein is focusing on bringing that back to produce much quicker, to respond rapidly, and to deliver these systems at a scale and a price point that the country can afford.
I got a couple of questions here for you before we wrap this up. The first one, Greenland, obviously huge news item this week. We've got a framework in place. We're starting to get some details about it. Key piece of the Greenland security pact that seems to be coming together is Golden Dome, which takes us back to this idea of hypersonic missiles and a homeland defense system. Why is Greenland so important to that?
Well, when you look at a map, people typically think, hey, I'm going to go east-west to go from here to there, but actually the shortest distance between us and Russia is actually over the pole. Greenland being close to the pole, you can obviously see the significance. Plus, with the warming of the Arctic, you're getting actually a lot more maritime traffic in the pole.
It's the new Panama Canal. I think that's what people are missing. And if you look on a Mercator map, a flat map, and Steve used to live in Russia, he gets it. Greenland is actually on the top. It's actually between Canada and Russia in the top, at the pointy end. And so, but on a flat map, it looks like it's over here. It also looks much larger than it is.
That's correct.
But there is a defense. In 1951, we put all these bases there, and it's a huge defense area, I think.
It is. No, it absolutely is. I mean, strategically, the United States wants to be able to control those types of areas, and so Greenland is very important to that.
Finally, I have to ask, because you come from SpaceX, and so do some of your other co-founders here. How does what you learned and what you did at SpaceX translate to the startup? And perhaps just as importantly, what do you think about the possibility of an IPO of your alma mater?
Well, exciting times, obviously, for SpaceX. I think one of the main things that SpaceX has shown everybody is just that the kind of Renaissance era in aerospace is not dead. That if you come at it with a different approach, you can achieve entirely different outcomes, which I think is good for the United States.
What is a registered agent?
It's simple. A registered agent is a person or company you assign to accept state.
Okay, so what I want to do is go to another video. This was done by the Wall Street Journal talking about the Venezuela dark fleet. All right, so let's watch that, see what's going on there.
Globe, billions of dollars of black market oil moves through a network of aging tankers known as the dark fleet. From high-tech signal spoofing to old-school disguise, these vessels employ shadowy tactics to bypass international law. But a new U.S. crackdown on Venezuelan oil is finally moving to strangle this illicit trade.
The dark fleet model, for now, in Venezuela has been broken.
The so-called Dark Fleet is a network of some 1,400 ships that transfer Venezuelan, Russian, and Iranian oil in violation of U.S. and other international sanctions. Analysts say about 1/5 of the world's oil is shipped by the Dark Fleet.
These tankers have been absolute cash cows for the unknown, hidden people, behind all of this trade.
These vessels use a variety of deceptive tactics to avoid detection by maritime authorities. First, there's spoofing, when a ship broadcasts its location from one place, but is actually thousands of miles away.
Venezuela has been, the OG of spoofing. They've been doing it since at least 2020.
Vessels sailing from Asia often hit the Cape of Good Hope and suddenly cut their transponders to vanish from global tracking, known as going dark.
And then it will start spoofing, and it will appear to go up to Lome, Togo, when in reality it continues sailing to Venezuela, loads its cargo, and then when it's ready, it's sailing back. All of a sudden that vessel will appear to come down off West Africa. The tanker will also say that it's going to call off Angola, for example. And it's all about deceptively trying to hide the fact that it's loaded Venezuelan oil.
Second, vessels will use covert ship-to-ship transfers once they vanish from the digital map, like this one caught on a satellite image in the South China Sea.
Ship-to-ship transfers are quite common in shipping, but they're done within port state limits and with port state authority. But this is done in international waters to avoid scrutiny.
Third, vessels will cycle through names and country flags to avoid detection. Out at sea, some crews even use paint to change the vessel's name. The White Crane became Rain, for example. These ships register in countries with looser maritime laws, or they fly false flags and have no registration at all.
So the equivalent of putting false plates on your car. But the problem with falsely flagged vessels, and there are literally hundreds of them now, is that they're flagless, they're lawless, and they're stateless. And that makes them vulnerable under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Seas to interdiction and seizure by national authorities because they can be boarded.
All of these tactics had helped Venezuelan strongman Nicolas Maduro evade U.S. sanctions and keep oil revenue flowing.
In 2025, Venezuela exported roughly 800,000 barrels per day. About 75% of that oil was done on sanctioned tonnage, and most of that sanctioned tonnage was deploying deceptive shipping practices.
Now the U.S. is cracking down, and it has seized several ships engaged in deceptive practices. The Skipper is one of those sanctioned ships. The 20-year-old tanker spoofed her location, showing she was offshore Guyana around October 28th. In reality, she sailed into Venezuelan waters, where she loaded up at the Jose terminal. On December 4th, she left with about 1.8 million barrels of crude oil. 2 days later, she offloaded a portion of that oil to another ship offshore Curacao. But before she got much further, the Skipper had visitors. A team of U.S. forces rappelled onto the ship, eventually redirecting the Skipper to U.S. waters.
The interdiction of the Skipper gave the owners and controllers of many dark fleet vessels pause for thought, and so that's when we started seeing vessels sailing to Venezuela, in a holding pattern for a couple of days, and then eventually they turned around.
Since then, the U.S. has interdicted several more tankers as it enforces a de facto blockade of Venezuelan oil, even after capturing Maduro. In response, some dark fleet vessels have raced to evade capture. The Bella 1 is just one example. As the Coast Guard chased her through the North Atlantic, the Bella 1 changed names to the Marinera and registered in Russia. The crew even painted Marinera in Cyrillic on the side of the ship, along with Sochi, the name of its new Russian port. Still, U.S. forces seized the vessel on January 7th.
It was a fake Russian oil tanker. They basically tried to pretend to be a Russian oil tanker in an effort to avoid the sanctions regime.
Analysts say that in the face of the U.S. campaign, a number of ships are trying to seek protection under the Russian flag.
That trend accelerated so rapidly that we've seen 20 vessels reflag in, since early December through to, early January. And they're not just in Venezuelan waters, they're also going through the English Channel, through to the Baltic to load crude and refined products for Russia. And so this, I think, is part of Russia trying to reclaim these vessels. Remember, the dark fleet is kind of like a lifeline for its energy commodities revenue, so they need to guarantee the safety and security of those ships.
Now there are no dark fleet tankers loading up on Venezuelan oil to ship to other markets, according to shipping analytics firm Kepler. President Trump has said the U.S. will control Venezuelan oil exports indefinitely and in cooperation with Venezuela's state-run oil company.
We've taken 50 million barrels of oil out of Venezuela in the first 4 days. We've got millions of barrels of oil left. We're selling it on the open market.
If and when sanctions are rolled back, millions of barrels of oil will be shipped on law-abiding tankers to refineries in the U.S. And analysts say it will mean the end of the dark fleet in Venezuela.
We haven't seen a dark fleet vessel arrive in Venezuela in weeks. It's quite likely that we won't see another dark fleet tanker load there. And when there's no more business for them, or they just get too old, too expensive to maintain, the beneficial owners just abandon the vessels and their crew.
While the dark fleet may be out of opportunities in Venezuela, it could still operate globally to move Iranian and Russian oil. But some analysts say the Trump administration has created a playbook that other countries can adopt.
I think the tolerance for the dark fleet is particularly low now, so there could be a lot of changes in early 2026 about how Western governments want to deal with it.
All right, we're going to listen to Navy Decoded. And we might even also go to a Greenland clip by CSIS. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the turmeric. This will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. And when you do that, you're helping your immune system, you're helping your endocrine system, you're helping your brain function and cardiovascular system. How? By bringing down chronic inflammation, you're helping your immune system, because with chronic inflammation, your cortisol levels are higher, and that's immunosuppressive. So you want to bring down the cortisol levels, that chronic higher concentration of cortisol and the chronic inflammation. And by doing that, your immune system is going to be improved. It's not going to be suppressed. By bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. And by bringing down inflammation at the neuron level, you're maintaining the myelin sheath and reducing the stress on the neuron. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the turmeric, and slow down the aging process. Soaking up free radicals and bringing down inflammation is a key component to slowing down the aging process. All right, let's listen into Navy Decoded. Let's get an idea of what their take is with the.
We can't hire you right now, but we'll keep you in mind. You'll keep me in mind.
It's a good day for a good deal at Outback. Get
January 8th, 2026, South China Sea. USS Abraham Lincoln conducting live fire exercises. Phalanx Seaways systems hammering targets. Standard operations. Another day in the Pacific. Then, the secure line from Compact Fleet rings on the bridge. New orders, new mission, new theater. Pack up, move out, sprint to the Persian Gulf. Not next week, now. Here's what makes that call critical. The Navy operates 11 aircraft carriers. But looking at the map, the Pentagon realized they were running out of options. USS George Washington is in Yokosuka, Japan. She is nearly 3,000 miles to the north, too far away to respond in time. USS Theodore Roosevelt just finished a maintenance availability. Fresh, ready, all systems green. USS Gerald R. Ford is the most advanced warship ever built, but she is currently locked in a standoff off the coast of Venezuela. But the Pentagon didn't send any of them. They sent Lincoln. Why? What crisis in the Middle East is worth abandoning the Pacific? What makes this specific carrier worth the strategic gamble? The answer comes down to two things.
You know what's interesting is in the news, in the early broadcasting of moving strike groups to Iran, the early broadcasting said that it was the Gerald Ford and the Abraham Lincoln that was moving, not just the Abraham Lincoln. Now, maybe they changed, or it was just wrong information, but I thought the Gerald Ford was moving towards Iran too.
And the F-35C. Because in January 2026, the Middle East isn't just tense, it is about to explode. And Washington needs a carrier that can execute a day-one strike to penetrate Iranian air defenses. Only Lincoln, with its future air wing, can do that. This is the story of the sprint. If you want to understand how American naval strategy actually works, type proud in the comments. Welcome to Navy Decoded. This is why they sent Lincoln. To understand why Lincoln, you have to look past the hull number and see the operational record. USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN 72, fifth ship of the Nimitz class. The motto stamped on every bulkhead, shall not perish. For 35 years, that hasn't been a slogan, it has been a promise. 295 consecutive days at sea. Let me say that again, 295 days. No port calls, no maintenance breaks, just sustained operations in 2020. China's carriers, 90 days maximum before they need to refuel and resupply. Russia's Kuznetsov hasn't left port in 3 years. Caught fire at the pier, still broken. Britain's Queen Elizabeth, 6-month deployments, standard. Lincoln did 10 months straight. And the crew didn't just survive it, they maintained full operational tempo. Flight operations 24/7, combat readiness at 100%. That is not endurance, that is dominance. But the ship operating today isn't the ship that launched in 1989. Between 2013 and 2017, the Navy invested $3 billion in a complete rebuild. They call it RCOH, Refueling and Complex Overhaul. Picture this, 4 years in dry dock. Technicians cut the ship open. They pull the nuclear cores. They rip out every wire, every pipe, every outdated system. Then they rebuild it. New reactors, fiber optics where copper used to run, sensors that didn't exist when the ship was designed. Most critical? Lincoln became the first Nimitz-class carrier modified specifically for the F-35C Lightning II. Not just compatible, optimized. Reinforced jet blast deflectors to handle the heat. Classified briefing rooms built right into the hull. Systems that let stealth fighters do things other platforms can't support. The ship that emerged wasn't a renovation, it was a transformation. 5th generation capability inside a proven hull. And crucial for this 2026 mission, combat proven. 18 months ago, the Lincoln was in the Red Sea. Iranian-backed Houthi forces launched anti-ship ballistic missiles at commercial vessels. Real missiles, real targets, real consequences. This crew shot them down. Multiple intercepts, under actual combat conditions. So when the orders came to sprint from the Pacific to the Persian Gulf, this wasn't theoretical. This was the crew that already knows what incoming fire looks like on an Aegis radar scope. 2 Westinghouse A4W nuclear reactors power the Lincoln. Unlimited range. The carrier covered 4,500 nautical miles in 8 days without slowing for fuel. But speed is just the delivery method. The real weapon is parked on the flight deck. Carrier Air Wing 9, CVW-9. 75 aircraft. The centerpiece? Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 314, VMFA 314, Black Knights. 10 F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters. Most channels stop at the jet numbers, but here on Navy Decoded, we look at the kill chain. But in 2026, stealth isn't a magic cloak. Iran knows this. That is why they integrated the Resonance NE radar system into their air defense network. This is a very high frequency, VHF, over-the-horizon radar. Standard targeting radars operate on short wavelengths, X-band. Stealth aircraft are shaped to deflect those waves. The Resonance NE operates on metric wavelengths. Physics dictates that when a radio wave matches the physical dimensions of an aircraft's tail or wing, it creates resonance. In theory, this allows Iranian commanders to detect the presence of an F-35C from hundreds of miles away. So, on paper, the stealth advantage seems compromised. But detection is not the same as targeting. The Resonance NE can tell Tehran something is there. It provides azimuth and range, but it lacks the precision to guide a missile. To shoot, they need to hand off the target to high-frequency engagement radars, like the ones on the S-300. And that is the exact moment the U.S. Navy's kill chain activates. Enter Electronic Attack Squadron 133, VAQ-133, the Wizards. They fly the EA-18G Growler. For this specific deployment, they are fielding the ALQ-249 next-generation jammer. This isn't just noise barrage. This is a digital, directed energy attack. The ALQ-249 isolates the specific frequencies of the Resonance NE and the S-300 fire control radars. It floods them with false targets and digital noise. Here is the operational reality. The Resonance NE detects a disturbance. It attempts to cue the S-300 fire control radar. The EA-18G Growlers jam the communication link and blind the fire control radar instantly. The Iranian operators are left with a low-resolution contact, but no firing solution. Meanwhile, the F-35Cs are passive. They don't emit radar. They use their sensors to triangulate the location of the Resonance NE based on its own emissions. The hunter becomes the prey. The F-35C pilots designate the coordinates. They can engage with standoff weapons, JSOW, or guide missiles from the destroyers. The Resonance NE is neutralized not by magic, but by superior electronic warfare integration. Once the radar network is degraded, the Super Hornets provide the strike mass. 3 squadrons, VFA-14, VFA-41, VFA-151. 36 aircraft carrying over 600,000 pounds of ordnance. They strike the static infrastructure, command centers, missile sites, and naval bases that are now blind. This is the concept of networked lethality. It is not about one plane being invisible. It is about the entire air wing dismantling the enemy's ability to complete a kill chain. And managing this entire operation from 300 miles away, E-2D Advanced Hawkeye. The ANAPY-9 radar tracks targets at 300 miles, manages over 1,000 contacts simultaneously. It is air traffic control for modern warfare, coordinates 75 aircraft, directs combat air patrol, controls the entire air wing from one platform. This isn't air superiority. This is air dominance so complete, the adversary can't effectively contest it. But 75 aircraft mean nothing if the carrier gets sunk. That is where the defensive network comes in.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words, create your brand.
3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers escort Lincoln. Together, they create a defensive bubble that makes Iranian anti-ship missiles tactically irrelevant. These ships carry nearly 300 vertical launch system cells, VLS. Each cell holds a different missile depending on what the mission requires. For Middle East deployment, the loadout emphasizes 3 capabilities: Tomahawk cruise missiles, BGM-109, range exceeding 1,000 miles, launched from the Gulf of Oman, hit command centers in Tehran. Precision guidance, minimal collateral damage. SM-3 ballistic missile interceptors, designed to shoot down Iranian missiles in mid-course phase, hitting a bullet with a bullet in space. SM-6 dual-role missiles, long-range air defense and anti-ship capability. Engage aircraft or target fast attack boats. The Aegis combat system ties everything together. All 3 destroyers share radar data in real time. They call it Cooperative Engagement Capability, CEC. One ship's radar can guide another ship's missile, creates overlapping coverage. 300 interceptors that can shoot from anywhere in the formation. Iran's strategy relies on overwhelming American defenses. Launch hundreds of missiles, deploy dozens of fast attack boats, saturate the system through sheer numbers. Aegis was designed for this scenario. Here's what happens. Iranian coastal batteries launch 50 missiles, all at once, trying to overwhelm the defenses. 3 seconds after launch, the Aegis system classifies every threat, calculates trajectories, prioritizes based on speed and impact probability, assigns interceptors automatically. The destroyers start firing. SM-3s climb, accelerate past Mach 4. At 100,000 feet, the kinetic warheads separate. They don't need explosives. Kinetic energy alone is enough. 40 Iranian missiles disappear from the scope. Intercepted, destroyed. 10 are still flying. Maybe, if the guidance systems work, if the Americans miss them. And the cost for launching that salvo? Every radar that turned on gets marked for destruction. Every launch site gets targeted. Every command bunker that gave the order gets erased. For 10 missiles that might penetrate the defense, Iran loses its entire coastal network in one night. That is not deterrence through threats. That is deterrence through math. Iranian planners understand the equation, and every day they choose to do nothing. January 18, 2026. The Strait of Malacca, one of the most monitored waterways on Earth. Lincoln enters the strait. Standard security procedures. Darkened ship, minimal lighting, reduced emissions. But you can't hide 97,000 tons of steel moving at 25 knots. Not in a strait where commercial traffic is bumper to bumper. An Iranian cargo vessel appeared. Ship name, Arvin. Course, Shanghai to Bandar Abbas. And it is matching the carrier's speed. Exactly. 2 miles off the starboard side. The watch officer reports it. Everyone on the bridge knows what is happening. That merchant ship is recording everything, photographing aircraft, timing the escort pattern. In 12 hours, this intelligence will be in Tehran. Revolutionary Guard commanders will have the complete picture. They'll know the air wing composition, the escort strength, the estimated arrival time. Pentagon's response? Nothing. No countermeasures, no intercept. This was deliberate, because Iran needed to see what was coming. They needed their military planners to sit in a room, review the data, and do the math. 1 carrier, 3 destroyers, 75 aircraft. Nuclear-powered, combat-proven. Stealth fighters. The calculation writes itself. Deterrence isn't about secrecy. It is about demonstrating capability so overwhelming that escalation becomes pointless. Iran saw everything, reported everything, and chose to do nothing. That is victory without a shot fired. Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide. Geopolitically, this is the world's most critical choke point. 21 million barrels of oil pass through here daily. That is roughly 20% of global consumption. For decades, Iran has developed a strategy known as A2AD, Anti-Access Area Denial. The goal is simple. In the event of conflict, make this strait impassable. They have positioned thousands of ballistic and cruise missiles along the coast. They utilize swarms of fast attack boats for asymmetric warfare. They can deploy naval mines to freeze global shipping. This is a formidable layered defense network designed to impose unacceptable costs on any navy attempting to force entry. However, the deployment of the USS Abraham Lincoln fundamentally alters this strategic calculus. It shifts the dynamic from area denial to sea control. Why? Because the Lincoln Carrier Strike Group brings capabilities that specifically counter the A2AD doctrine. Iran's strategy relies on two things: concealment, hiding their launchers, and saturation, firing everything at once. The Lincoln's air wing dismantles both pillars. First, countering concealment. The F-35C Lightning II is not just a Striker, it is an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance ISR platform. Operating inside the contested airspace, these stealth aircraft can detect and map mobile missile batteries and coastal radar sites without being tracked. They deny Iran the element of surprise. If Tehran prepares to launch, the U.S. Navy likely knows the grid coordinates before the first missile fires. Second, countering saturation. The strike group provides a deep strike option. In a hypothetical escalation, American commanders do not need to wait for Iran to close the strait. With the data from F-35Cs and E-2D Hawkeyes, the Super Hornets can execute precision strikes against the source of the threat, the command nodes and launch sites inland, rather than just intercepting missiles over the water. This creates a strategic dilemma for Tehran. If they attempt to close the Hormuz Strait, they reveal the location of their most valuable strategic assets. Once those assets engage, they become visible. Once they are visible, the Lincoln's air wing can neutralize them. The cost of closing the strait for a few days could be the permanent degradation of their entire coastal defense infrastructure. This is the definition of deterrence by denial. It convinces the adversary that their objective is unachievable, or that the cost exceeds any potential gain. The Lincoln is not there to start a war. It is there to prove that a war cannot be won by closing the strait. It forces Iranian planners to look at the math. They retain the capability to disrupt shipping, yes, but they lack the capability to survive the counterstrike that follows. So the oil continues to flow, not because the threat has vanished, but because the counterweight, sitting just over the horizon, is heavy enough to keep the scale balanced. 21 million barrels a day, guaranteed not by treaties, but by operational capacity. So, why Lincoln? Why did the Pentagon choose this specific hull, this specific crew, to answer the call? It wasn't random. It was a calculation based on trust. When the stability of the global economy hangs by a thread, you don't send a trainee. You don't send a ship that might be ready. You send the veteran. The Navy looked at the board and saw only one option. The only carrier that combines the eyes of the Marine F-35C stealth squadrons with the fist of a crew that has already shot down hostile missiles in the Red Sea. They chose the ship that spent 4 years and $3 billion being rebuilt for this exact moment. A ship that has proven it can stay at sea for 295 days without breaking. Lincoln wasn't just available, she was engineered for this threat. Her motto is, "Shall not perish." For 35 years, that phrase has been written on the hull. But today, in the Persian Gulf, it means something more. It means the global supply chain shall not perish. It means freedom of navigation shall not perish. The next time you fill up your car or see a flight take off, remember why that is possible. It is not luck. It is because 5,000 Americans, all volunteers, are standing watch on 4.5 acres of sovereign territory, halfway across the world. They are operating the most complex machine ever built in the most dangerous waters on Earth so that you can sleep soundly tonight. That is the American guarantee. Presence is the deterrent. Capability is the proof. And the USS Abraham Lincoln is the reason the line holds. If this analysis gave you a new perspective on American naval power, you belong here on Navy Decoded. Hit subscribe for the next videos.
Blink and get more with new 2K
Like
Plus
direct
Smart Security.
eye contact.
With Blink 2K Plus,
Showing
get
up
set up
late
in minutes.
on purpose.
So busy.
Hold on.
Jonathan Sae over at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Iran program, joining us now live to discuss much more about the latest there. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here.
Hi, it's great to be with you.
And first off, I wanted to start by asking you about those comments from Iran's top prosecutor. Why did he feel that maybe it was important to point that out?
That was a very clear message from the Islamic Republic to this administration, stating that we will not respond to pressure. That has been the Islamic Republic's line for years now, meaning from their perspective, if they were to have any behavior change, that would signal a weakness to their support base and to their adversaries. So the regime wants to be very clear that you will not get behavior change from us. And that is in response to the administration's maximum pressure policy that has sought to perhaps alter the Islamic Republic's behavior, quote unquote, making them behave like a normal state. But so far, we haven't really seen them change that behavior, given that the Islamic Republic is inherently incapable of reforms. This was a regime that was founded on repression and executions. Therefore, if they were to change that in any way, that would be a transformation of the Islamic Republic, which, as we've seen, is not really possible. So again, it was a direct message to this administration. But more importantly, they rejected the 300 number. But realistically, they were the ones that messaged that to the administration. So there's also a contradiction between their private messages to the administration and what they publicly state.
Also wanted to ask you about this blackout. We're talking phones, internet, all of that. That's been going on for weeks. Does it still continue there in Iran, even though the protests have kind of dwindled?
The way to look at it is, even though we talk about internet outages, you pointed out electricity and actually landlines getting out. So the regime apparatus has been able to really develop a capability that would go beyond a simple blackout. They oftentimes throttle the internet, and that's what we're seeing right now. Even though there might be certain limited instances where particular officials might have access to the internet, as a whole, the country is still facing different outages of throttling and, of course, surveillance. The other angle of looking at this is that for the regime itself, shutting down the internet as long as they have has economic implications. Of course, we've seen Iran's economy really crumble in the last few months, dare I say. But it's really important to note that it's even challenging for them. This is not an ideal situation of shutting down the entire country, given all the crises that's going on. So they would try their best to limit that, I guess, outages, but ultimately it does signal to us that as soon as there's internet restrictions, even lifted in a very small scale, we see videos coming out of the brutal massacres of security forces opening fire on protesters. So the aim there is, of course, to disconnect protesters from each other, but more importantly, to disconnect Iranians as a whole from the outside world. So, you know, if it's effectively an open-air prison is what Iranians are calling it. 90 million people without having access to the outside world is really unprecedented for it to go on as long as it has, about 3 weeks now.
Is there any evidence of large-scale executions taking place right now, despite the claims from Iran that President Trump has not stopped them? Any indication that those executions are happening or could happen?
There are certainly signs that they could and will happen. So you have to remember, the Islamic Republic is the highest executioner per capita. They execute the most amount of people, only second to China, but again, the highest per capita. In 2024, they executed about 975 people. In 2025, that number was as high as 1,500 people. And these are just executions. We're not talking about the protesters that are shot dead in the street. So if you look at the trajectory, they have been on the rise. If you look at what the judiciary is saying, they're very clear that they're not going to back down this time around. They're going to intensify. They saw this as an existential threat, which means they're going to do their best in neutralizing it, quote unquote, which literally means executions. But we have seen executions actually take place in the past few weeks. Although these are dissidents, or in other cases, whatever crime they were accused of in the past week or so. But the point is, these were people that were arrested prior to the recent wave that are getting executed right now. But when we talk about mass executions, this is something that the Islamic Republic doesn't really do as much as it used to. They do it in a gradual scale. So it's not that they execute 800 people overnight. They do it, like I said, day by day, and it usually totals over a few thousand on an annual basis. So the signers are really there, And sometimes you have to take the regime officials' word for it when they announce that they will go after these dissidents.
Any indication here that we could actually see some U.S. military intervention there in Iran? That's been a topic of discussion for weeks now. President Trump has said he's kind of dialed it back because he says that Iran did stop those executions, hundreds of them, after their conversation. So any indication that we could potentially see the U.S. get involved?
In this case, actions really speak louder than words. We have to remember, prior to the 12-day war in June, where Israel and the United States struck the Islamic Republic's military and nuclear sites, we saw similar remarks coming from the president. Again, of course, operation of this scale is not going to be announced in detail, so that's one important thing for us to keep in mind. But I think it really goes back to what Israel and America see as a threat inside Iran. And that is the ballistic missile program. That, again, they have hundreds, if not thousands, of silos. They try to recreate launchers. And that's their main leverage against, really, their adversaries, because they don't have a nuclear program anymore, nor do they have the proxies that were effectively a shield or deterrence, as they thought. So given that this administration and Israel are keen on taking out the ballistic missile stockpiles, this is an unprecedented opportunity for them to leverage. Because if you were to let this moment die out and then simply attack the regime just to take out their ballistic missiles, you lose the momentum on the ground. You lose this protest movement that is inherently pro-America, pro-Israel, anti-Islamist. Iran has one of the most pro-America populations in the Middle East. So really missing the mark there would have strategic consequences for America. That said, all the signs are pointing to a potential military confrontation. We saw some movement in the region. We saw the deployment of troops. Israel has tapped into its air force again. So the signs are headed that way, and I think we should track that instead of specific remarks coming from the administration.
Jonathan, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here. We definitely appreciate it. Anything we missed? Anything you want to make sure?
I'm a little surprised that Trump hasn't hit Iran already. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lignans. Lignans will help to bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, help your endocrine system and your immune system. By bringing down inflammation and free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation, and reducing inflammation and soaking up free radicals at the neuron level, you're reducing stress on the neuron. The neurons are healthier, and they will perform properly and improve the neuroplasticity, improve the dendritic connections, so you're thinking better. Please go to my store, get the lignans, take it every day. There's a rumor out there in terms of the war in the Middle East that the United States is getting ready for a major potential defensive move to counteract a move from Iran attacking Israel in the beginning of April. Some rabbis are out there talking about this, talking about that they're concerned, and the Israeli intelligence is concerned about some major hit on Israel by Iran through its proxies and through its own military prowess to hit Israel on Passover, right? So we're talking about the beginning of April. That might be part of the reason why we're moving a lot more equipment in that region for sustained operations. Maybe the rabbis and, the rumor mill is wrong, but that's another thing to keep in mind here, is that we may hear nothing about hitting Iran until April or late March. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg.
How about that, Joe Matthew? This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, we thank you. Charlie's going to keep tabs on the markets for us today. As always, on Balance of Power, it's great to have you with us on the Friday edition. Our snowstorm edition will have a lot more on the politics of snow as the day progresses here. And Rick and Jeannie certainly have some thoughts when it comes to the impact of this storm on business and politics, whether it's New York City or Dallas. Some interesting challenges coming up here. Thanks for joining us on Bloomberg Radio. We're streaming live on YouTube right now. Meet us by searching Bloomberg Business News Live. We'll always save a seat for you here in the studio. Watching shares of NVIDIA, as Charlie just mentioned, not too bad, up $3 today, almost 2%. a very important story that's coming out of our newsroom that you're not going to hear about anywhere else. China telling Alibaba and the biggest tech firms in China that they can start processing orders for the H200 chips. This is a story that's gone back and forth for months and months, whether we're talking about export controls on the US side or some of the stalling that's been reported on the China side. Say, hey, keep your chips, we're making our own. So it looks like this trade is actually about to take place. It's where we start our conversation with Bloomberg's Mike Shepard, who owns this story as our senior editor for technology and strategic industries. Mike, it's great to see you. I recall a conversation that John Micklethwaite had with the CEO at Anthropic. You know this gentleman. He's a very influential guy when it comes to the culture around AI as well as the technology. He's been warning people about things. Dario Amodei, listen to what he said about the idea of selling these high-end AI chips to China. Listen.
I think it would be a big mistake to ship these chips. The analogy I thought of, if you think about the incredible national security implications of building models that are essentially cognition, that are essentially intelligence, right? I've called where we're going with this a country of geniuses in a data center, right? So imagine 100 million people smarter than any Nobel Prize winner, and it's going to be under the control of one country or another. I think this is crazy. I think it's a bit like I don't know, like selling nuclear weapons to North Korea.
That's quite an analogy. Says it's crazy. Mike, this administration does not agree.
No, the administration disagrees. But the point that Dario Amodei is making there is that if you give China access to these advanced semiconductors from NVIDIA and from AMD to help power AI development on the training and inference side, well, you are allowing some of the model makers in the country, which are competing with companies like Anthropic, like OpenAI, and like others here in the US for that global share of the market. So whose version of AI, in essence, is what he is saying, will the world be adopting? Will it be one from a more open society or one from a more closed society? So that is sort of the question he is raising there. But the administration has argued in turn that, look, China is a juggernaut in this area. And the only way to compete with China globally is to do so in its own market in the hardware space. But they also view it as not just a hardware equation. We've heard Jensen Huang talk about artificial intelligence as this 5-layer cake. It starts with the hardware, but then it goes all the way up to the software that companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and others develop and use for AI.
So was China just playing coy before at one point it was disincentivizing Chinese companies? They said they wouldn't even accept the chips at one point. China wants NVIDIA chips or AMD, right? This is a commodity.
This is a great question, Joe, because we don't really have as clear a picture into what their desires and wishes are on this. And there is some sort of an internal conflict there, just as there is here. You mentioned it at the top, that they are promoting their own domestic champions, and that includes Huawei Technologies, which of course is subject to U.S. blacklisting for several years, and Cambricon Technologies too, which is making inroads in chip making as well. They would like to see some of these domestic champions really emerge as leaders in chip making for China internally, but then also for export externally to other markets in Latin America, and Africa, to the Middle East, you name it. And what they see is like, wait, the dilemma, if we allow the American tech stack to come in, we end up competing and perhaps cannibalizing some of our own chip makers. And yet, the demand from some of the hyperscalers in China, Tencent, Alibaba, ByteDance, are all among the potential customers cited in our scoop from early this morning. They really need those chips to be able to make the kinds of advances that they want.
What do you think of the stock reaction or lack thereof? You tell me, because Jensen Huang had said we've got a zero right on the China line item here in our forecast. So any business in China would be gravy on top of what NVIDIA is already doing. It's up a couple of bucks. Were investors expecting this?
Well, investors have been expecting it, but there is also a little bit of caution because China is still only engaging with the potential buyers, and we don't really have a sense of what the quantities and amounts will be based on, and what sort of baseline the U.S. government will actually be using, Joe, to determine exactly how many licenses for how many chips will be ultimately issued. So there is sort of an X factor lingering out there about just how much of a sale will this be to what is the world's largest semiconductor market for NVIDIA.
Intel is having a rough ride today, kind of the opposite side of the coin here. It's down 16% right now. It's had a massive run-up. Forecast didn't make anybody happy last night. Does this say more about the run-up into earnings or the fact that we are actually going to see a slowdown?
Well, it is a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And the new CEO, Lip-Bu Tan, who has forged a chummy relationship with President Donald Trump since he took over from Pat Gelsinger. He's met with the president at the White House at least twice. One of the earlier meetings actually led to the U.S. government committing to taking as much as a 10% stake in the chip maker. And the idea was to try to give it a bit of a boost. And Donald Trump always wants a little bit of a piece of the action when he can find it, and especially for the U.S. government in this case. But what Lip-Bu Tan is warning about is something that a lot of analysts and observers have recognized fundamentally, is the chicken and egg problem. This is one that if Intel is going to secure customers, it has to be able to show that it can produce efficiently. And it has to get its yield of usable chips much higher than it currently has right now. And that was a problem that the CEO identified during the call yesterday. And overall, the forecast was a big letdown for investors who've come to expect more from the chip maker than they've been getting.
That's great context, Mike. I've got to ask you about TikTok since you're here.
Yeah.
You and I spent many hours talking about this deal when people were laughing at the idea. It closed. TikTok seals the deal to operate in the U.S. After years of drama. Our headline: what will be the test here for Oracle and the others to prove that this is working?
They will have to, it will be a test on a couple of different levels.
Yeah.
One will be to show users here in the U.S.
Switch to
that there won't be any disruption or disturbance in the force when it comes to the way that they have been using the app. There are a lot of people who use it for, of course, entertainment purposes. That, it's just fun to look at your feed and see what's coming in, whatever videos you might
January 8th, 2020.
But there are a lot of other people who use it for business purposes. There are small businesses that actually operate and have little storefronts on TikTok and try to sell their wares. And TikTok is also trying to get into more of the e-commerce space itself to try to compete with Amazon and with other platforms. So the measure will be, the user experience and whether people really notice something, and if they feel that there's any change in their experience and engagement with it under the new U.S. Owned and led operation.
Are you on TikTok now that this is? Do we all go on TikTok now, James? Now they can't get our data, right?
Yeah, and that is one of the other benchmarks, and especially for lawmakers here in Washington, Joe. And that is
they're already on TikTok.
Well, many of them are, but there are just as many with misgivings about the platform because of the national security concerns that have led to the call for the ban. So the question is the company able to demonstrate that the data on U.S. users truly is hived off from ByteDance, the former Chinese parent, which still has a pretty big investment stake and something of a say in the company?
Boy, I'm gonna have to ask my kid, right? How do I get on TikTok now?
TikTok is in the US. What do you think?
I'll do that with you if you want. We can.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. This has 68 nutrients. It will help multiple systems for your body. It will help to rev up your metabolism, increase your energy levels, help with musculature, help with brain function and cardiovascular health, boost up your immune system, slow down the aging process, help with your endocrine system. By taking Boomer Boost every day, you're going to slow down the aging process. It has a very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen here. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take this every day. You're going to notice within that first 72 hours of taking this, your energy levels have increased. It's a steady burn of energy. You're going to be able to concentrate better. You're going to sleep better. And over time, you're actually going to notice that your immune system and endocrine system is reaching homeostasis, and you're slowing down the aging process. This is very important to take every day. Also, get the C60. C60 is a very strong antioxidant. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration on my store. You can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, or MCT coconut oil. Take a teaspoon a day every day. And by doing that, you're helping your cardiovascular health, you're helping your immune system, endocrine system, your brain function. You're slowing down the aging process. You'll have more energy. You'll have healthier mitochondria. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach. If you work out, take it before your workout so you recover quicker. And what you'll notice is that you'll have more energy and the cells will perform properly because you're soaking up those free radicals and reducing the stress in the cell, reducing inflammation, but you're also soaking up those free radicals, boosting up the health of that mitochondria, and you'll have more ATP. And when you get older, your ATP levels normally decline. Your immune system starts to decline. Your inflammation starts to increase. Now, if you bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and boost up your energy levels, you're slowing down the aging process. So it's a really simple concept. So take a teaspoon a day every day. By soaking up the free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. And by reducing stress and soaking up free radicals at the neuron level, your neurons are healthier, producing the neurotransmitters, having better dendritic connections, and you'll have better cognition. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. All right, this is CSIS about Greenland. It's about a 9-minute clip.
Context. We are hearing a lot about Greenland's strategic importance, and so we thought that we would break it down. So let's turn to some slides to discuss Greenland's strategic importance. Now, does Greenland matter? The first reason why Greenland matters is because the Arctic is changing. Right now, in the Arctic Ocean, there's a lot of sea ice melt. This is from 1981 to 2010. You can see that in the Arctic, that it was really hard to traverse it. That there's no passageway through the Northwest Passage. There's no real way through the Northern Sea Route. The Arctic is iced in most of the year, and so it's not an attractive place for shipping and for commercial activity.
I don't know if you can see this, but it's very important. Maybe I'll move it up. There's another aspect to this that needs to be addressed. All right, let's see here. Okay, so here's the Arctic, Greenland, Canada, Canada, Alaska, Russia, Europe. Okay? Now, it is a known fact that the icebreakers from Russia are creating passages from around July to October for China to move goods into Europe and into Russia, all right? Through the Arctic Passage. That's China, all right? Why? Because China doesn't want to go through all these choke points that are in Southeast Asia, through the Suez, because the United States has hegemonic power. Now, the United States doesn't control north of Russia in the Arctic. So there's about, I don't know, maybe 12 or 20 different icebreakers that Russia has that allows for passage in the Arctic above Russia for China, okay? China is allowed to go through here. China uses that to circumvent the hegemonic power of the United States because we have dominance in the Middle East. We have dominance in the Indian Ocean and in the choke points of Southeast Asia, in Indonesia. All right, now, so that's one major consideration here. Then there is the navigation for the United States from Alaska to move through northern Canada, right, to go to Europe. That's one, but that is relatively unused. All right. Now, there's a lot of islands that start to pop up once the Arctic ice starts to shrink. So it ebbs and flows. The Arctic ice ebbs and flows, all right? So as it's receding, there are islands above Canada where there's probably a lot of natural gas and oil. And there are islands above Russia that probably have the natural gas and oil. So this is a natural gas and oil play, and this is a freedom of navigation to circumvent the normal routes. Now, for the United States, we don't ship a lot of stuff out of Alaska. But if we did, and we wanted to ship to Europe, if this ice starts to shrink more, we'll probably be able to use the passage above Canada and through Greenland to allow for that to happen. But we don't really make a whole lot from Alaska. Now there's LNG, right? There's natural gas and oil that's coming out of Alaska. So there's a possibility for that, development of LNG. A lot of the goods and service, a lot of the goods that are being produced would be on either the Pacific or the Atlantic side of the continental United States. So if it's on the Atlantic side of the continental United States, coming up into Europe through the Atlantic Ocean may make, we're doing that already, right? Now, what about the western side of the continental United States? Well, instead of going down Central America and then through the Panama Canal and then up, it makes more sense to go around Alaska and hopefully either go through the route towards Russia or go through the route towards Canada and then get into Europe. This is another reason why Greenland is super important. But the biggest reason is that we need Greenland as part of the Golden Dome for defense, because missiles can go over the Atlantic. Over the Arctic. And then there's mineral rights of Greenland. Oil, gas, rare earth metals, but it would take many years to develop that. All right, let's continue with CSIS.
But what we see is that the Arctic ice is melting. This is 2024. Suddenly there is room along Russia's coast and potentially along the Northwest Passage. Then when we turn to where we expect Arctic sea ice to go in 2050, we can see that the Arctic is much more navigable across the Arctic. While there's still some ice presence, particularly north of Greenland, it becomes much more traversable for ships. So let's look at this. So this is superimposing where the ice was, where it is today, and where we expect it to be. So when we talk about shipping through the Arctic, there's a Northwest Passage. This route is pretty difficult to traverse. There's not many people up there. Search and rescue is very difficult, and there's still a lot of ice. So we're not seeing a lot of shipping there now. Then when we look at where we're starting to see shipping go through in the Arctic, it's really along Russia's coastline, around the Northern Sea Route or the Northeast Passage. And this is where we're starting to see increase.
And the reason why
Chinese
they're
shipping.
doing that is because Russia is invested in the icebreakers to allow for China to move their goods. If we did the same thing above Canada, or Canada invested in icebreakers to a large degree, then the United States would use that passage more often, especially for goods that are coming from the West. side of the country. But there's a lot of oil and gas in this region. It's projected that there's a lot of oil and gas right above Canada.
When we project ahead, what we see is that there's potentially a route simply over the North Pole, over the Arctic, but that would require significant sea ice melt to continue over the next few years. When we look ahead, what
Now
we
let's
can
now
see
think about
is
that.
there
Now
are
think about that for a second. You keep on hearing the climate alarmists saying that if oceans, if the Arctic melts and the Antarctic melts, then it's going to be the end of humanity and everything's going to be flooded and blah blah blah, right? We're already figuring out ways to move goods across the Arctic if the ice melts. I'm not too worried about the climate turning humanity into dust. But the chances are we're not going to have the ice completely melted. I think there's a feedback loop, and what will happen is actually we might have more ice, not less ice.
real shipping routes that could be really attractive to especially the Chinese, but also to the US and to other European shipping companies. And the reason why is that when we look at a map of how long it takes to ship from goods from China to Northern Europe to the ports in the UK and Rotterdam in the Netherlands, if you're going to go through the Suez Canal, the Straits of Malacca, there are choke points here. Choke point here, off the coast of Djibouti, here's the Suez Canal, and even in Gibraltar. It's a long trip, it takes a while, so it's much shorter actually for Chinese goods if they're going to travel to Northern Europe to go through the Arctic. That is part of the reason why we're seeing an increase in Chinese commercial activity in the Arctic. The other thing that we hear about are the rare earths, the critical minerals that Greenland has major deposits of. And what we can see here is when you look at the top rare earth mines by ore grade, here's Greenland here. Well, they're in the top 15. They have one mine that has really considerable amounts of minerals. But there are other problems here. The problem is that it's very cold. It's very hard to get to extract from these mines to make it economical. Greenland is oftentimes iced in. There are less than 100 miles of road in Greenland. The ports that would be needed to really extract minerals it's very difficult to extract them. So when you look at the chart again, what you see is that, well, there are major deposits in the United States, in Australia, in parts of Africa, places where it's probably more easy to extract rare earths than in Greenland. So then when another reason that we might be interested in Greenland by people all over the world is just look at its size. Greenland on the Mercator map, when you lay a map out flat, it looks enormous. It looks huge. It looks way bigger than the United States, but in fact, it is not. If we put Greenland in the right size perspective, what we see is it's still very large. It's roughly the size of around 20% of the United States, so it's like the East Coast. So very big, but not quite as big as we might think of it. So the other thing that we are hearing is that Greenland is critical to U.S. national security, the security of NATO. So let's talk about security and the military issues that may arise from the fact that China and Russia are increasingly commercially engaged in the Arctic Ocean, where the Arctic is melting. We are seeing an uptick in Chinese and Russian activity in the Arctic. For China, what we're seeing is increased activity over by Alaska in the Pacific part of the Arctic, by the Bering Straits, where there's been joint naval activities. This is an Arctic military tracker that we do at CSIS that highlights reported activities of Chinese and Russian ships. There may be other clandestine activities that we're not totally aware of, but what we can tell from what is reported is that where China is mainly around Alaska. And then what we see from Russia is it's mainly along the Russian coastline and along the coastline of Norway and of the UK down here. What we're not really seeing is a lot of Chinese or Russian military activity along the coast of Greenland. That's not to say that there is no activity. There are probably commercial activity, and some of the commercial activity involves intelligence activity. So it's not that they're completely ignoring Greenland, but what we're not seeing is lots of activity all along Greenland's coast that would then precipitate the need for sort of urgent action on the part of the United States and NATO. Historically, why the US has been interested in Greenland, especially during the Cold War, is because if we look at the map, and these are Russian ICBMs, is if Russia's going to launch its ICBMs and target where I'm standing right now in Washington, D.C., a lot of those ICBMs fly over Greenland. And that's why we have currently a space base there in Greenland that is active, that has 150 Americans that are currently present to monitor potential launches and to monitor space. And if there was going to be an ICBM launch against the United States, that we would be able to be aware of it. And so Greenland is critical for early warning. What we can also tell if we go to the map is that NATO has quite a significant presence in the Canadian Arctic. There's lots of early warning systems. There's Canadian bases, US bases, Arctic bases along in the north of Canada. And that Russia is quite present in the Arctic with lots of military bases. And there is concern about the quote-unquote GI-UK gap between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK. And here, this is a major point of concern, particularly if NATO forces needed to be resupplied by the US and that we were coming across. We would be worried about the Russian Northern Fleet coming in and interdicting those. And so there is a lot of concern about the high north. So this has meant that during the Cold War period, we had a fairly significant military presence in Greenland, up to 6,000 troops, roughly 15 military installations in Greenland. And today we have gone down to having just one base with 150 US forces. So let's close. So does Greenland matter? Let's put it in context. The answer is yes, Greenland does matter. The answer is the Arctic is increasing security importance. The Arctic is melting. There's going to be more commercial activity. It is of growing focus for US national security, as it should be. However, if the US needs to get back to the presence that it had during the Cold War when we were very concerned about the Soviet Union, we can do that under the 1951 treaty that we have with Denmark. When it comes to the critical minerals that are in Greenland that currently really are not economical for anyone to extract, well, eventually they might be, but right now we could do economic arrangements or agreements with Denmark that would give us access, or that would prevent, most importantly, China and Russia from having commercial involvement in Greenland. All of that is on the table. And so what that means is possessing Greenland for US security is something that is probably not in our interest, and particularly because it could mean the end of NATO if we were to pursue that, and it could lead to a lot of economic costs if it were to break relations with the European Union, which is one of our the most important trading partner that the United States has. So if we put the security of Greenland in context, I think what we find is it's of growing importance, but probably not as important to upset an alliance that is 76 years old, one of the strongest and most important in history, and one of the most important economic relationships with the European Union in the history of the world. So does Greenland matter? The answer is yes, but we need to put it in context.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. Gladiator Barley will help to soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase, detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and also build muscle. This will help you to recover from your workout quicker. You do some resistance training, take the Gladiator Barley, it'll help you to build muscle, reduce atrophy, and that helps to slow down the aging process and control your A1C levels, your blood glucose levels. When you're bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals, and detoxifying your body, you're also helping your immune system, your endocrine system, your cardiovascular system, and brain function. And Myotrol will help with the gene expression to build muscle, to reduce atrophy. This is super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older, male or female. Do some resistance training. Take the Myotrol, drink it with filtered water. This is polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. They'll also help the health of your mitochondria so you have the energy to maintain your muscle and to build it. Now, it stacks really well with the Gladiator Barley. Gladiator Barley has the ingredients to build muscle. Myotrol has the ingredients for gene expression to build muscle. You stack them together and it's a synergistic approach. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll benefit from this because you're going to be able to build strength for your sport quicker. But it's really important to slow down the aging process. You need to borrow lessons learned from sports medicine. And in sports medicine, you can build strength by taking the right supplementation and working out the proper way. Well, you can reduce atrophy, build bone density, help with your cardiovascular health by working out properly and taking the right supplementation. So make sure you do some resistance training. About 65% of your workout should be resistance training. About 35% should be cardio. Make sure you stretch and do balancing exercises to activate your cerebellum. And take the proper supplementation to build up that muscle, especially your back muscle, so you have proper posture, better blood flow, because if you have better posture, your venous return to your heart, your venous flow to your heart will improve, and your lymphatic flow will improve. So your immune system will be better just by having better back posture. A lot of people don't think about this, but part of the aging process is starting to move forward and shrinking, and you're starting to lose bone density and muscle mass. Well, improve your back posture, and you're going to improve a lot of other things. Your cardiovascular health and your immune system. When you have better back posture, you're also increasing your density for your vertebrae. So your bone density is improving. So it's really important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Myotrol, get the Gladiator Barley, and build that muscle. That's the end of my broadcast for today. Thank you for listening. Make sure you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off. And the United States should have Greenland. Why? Because we want it. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.